The sound of hoofbeats behind her meant death. Eliza Cross knew it with the certainty of a woman who'd spent 3 weeks running. Her horse stumbled on the frozen ground, breath coming in ragged clouds. Ahead, through the driving snow, a single light flickered, the last ranch before the mountains swallowed the world whole. Behind her, voices carried on the wind, men's voices. The kind that didn't stop, didn't forgive, didn't forget. She had two choices: keep running and freeze, or knock on that door and pray the person inside wasn't worse than what chased her. If you want to see how one desperate decision changed everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The ranch house sat like a gravestone against the winter sky. Eliza pressed her hand to the weathered door, feeling the wood grain bite into her frozen palm. This was it, the last structure for 60 miles in any direction worth calling shelter. Behind it, the Wyoming wilderness stretched endless and indifferent. Before her knock could fall, the door swung inward. A man filled the frame. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of storm clouds, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains. He held a rifle, not pointed at her, but not exactly friendly either. "Help you?" His voice carried the flat wariness of a man who'd learned not to trust strangers. Eliza's teeth chattered so hard she could barely form words. I need work, any work. I can cook, clean, mend. Can you?" He looked her over, city clothes torn and mud-stained, hands that had clearly never held anything heavier than a teacup, face gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. His expression said everything his words didn't. "I can learn." She hated how her voice cracked. "Please, I just need—" "Riders coming." He wasn't looking at her anymore, but past her, at the horizon where 3 dark shapes had crested the ridge. "Those men friends of yours?" "No." The word came out sharp as breaking ice. Something shifted in his face. He stepped aside. "Get in! Quick!" Eliza didn't need to be told twice. She stumbled over the threshold, and he shut the door behind her with a solid thunk that sounded like a coffin lid closing, or a sanctuary locking. The interior was sparse but functional, a main room with a stone fireplace, a table scarred by years of use, shelves holding supplies organized with military precision. Everything spoke of a man who lived alone and preferred it that way. "Name's Dane Keller." He moved to the window, rifle still in hand, watching the riders approach. "This is my ranch. Been mine for 8 years. "Eliza Cross." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shaking. "Those men. What do they want with you, Miss Cross?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eliza watched his reflection in the dark window glass, the set of his shoulders, the way his finger rested near the trigger guard but not on it, a man ready for violence but not eager for it. "My husband died," she said finally. "Left debts. The men who held those debts, they had ideas about how I could pay them back." Dane's jaw tightened. "I see. I ran. Been running for 3 weeks. She laughed, a brittle sound. "Guess I didn't run far enough." The riders were closer now, close enough to see their faces through the swirling snow. 3 men bundled in heavy coats, their horses' breath steaming. The one in front sat his saddle like a king surveying conquered territory. "That's Garrett Wade," Dane said quietly. "Knows him from town. Bounty hunter, among other things. Not a good man. None of them are." Dane was quiet for a long moment, his eyes tracking the approaching riders. Then, "You got any money?" "No." "A family? Friends who'd take you in?" "If I did, I wouldn't be here." He nodded slowly as if she'd confirmed something he already knew. "They're gonna knock, gonna ask if I've seen you. What do you want me to say?" Eliza's heart hammered. This was it. The moment where she learned whether she'd found sanctuary or just a different kind of trap. "I don't know. What are you going to say?" Dane turned from the window to look at her directly. In the firelight, his face was all hard plains and shadows, unreadable as stone. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to hear an unconventional proposal." Before Eliza could respond, a heavy fist pounded on the door. Dane held up one hand. "Wait," and moved to answer it, rifle held casually but ready. He opened the door just wide enough to be polite, not wide enough to be welcoming. "Wade, hell of a night to be out riding." Keller. Garrett Wade was a big man gone to fat, with small eyes that gleamed with mean intelligence. Looking for someone. Woman, traveling alone. Dark hair, about yay tall, probably half frozen by now. You seen her? Why are you looking? She's wanted. Theft, fraud, breaking contract. Wade smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. There's money in it for anyone who helps us find her. That so? Dane's voice remained neutral. How much money? $50. Not bad for a night's work. From her position against the far wall, Eliza felt her stomach drop. $50 was a fortune out here. More than most men made in 3 months. Dane would be a fool not to take it. Dane scratched his jaw, considering. $50, you say? And what happens to her when you find her? That ain't your concern. You seen her or not? The silence stretched. Eliza could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the warmth of the fire at her back, and the cold certainty of what came next settling into her bones. This was where it ended. She'd escaped her husband's creditors, fled halfway across the territory, survived storms and starvation, and her horse going lame, all for nothing. Because this stranger, this Dane Keller, was going to do what any sensible person would do, take the money and hand her over. No, Dane said flatly. Haven't seen her. Wade's eyes narrowed. You sure about that? Maybe she came by and you missed her. Big ranch like this, easy to overlook things. I don't overlook things on my land, Wade. And I said I haven't seen her. You calling me a liar? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Wade's hand drifted toward his hip, then stopped as he took in Dane's stance, the rifle, the absolute certainty in his eyes. No offense meant, Keller. Just doing my job. Your job's done here. Try the Morrison place, 15 miles south. They get drifters sometimes. Wade's gaze swept past Dane, trying to see into the room behind him. Eliza held perfectly still, barely breathing. Finally, Wade nodded. Much obliged for your time. You change your mind. You know where to find me. I won't change my mind. Dane shut the door and bolted it. He stood there for a moment, head bowed, hands still on the wood. Outside voices murmured, then the sound of horses moving off. He waited until the hoofbeats faded completely before turning around. Eliza stared at him. Why? Why what? Why did you lie for me? You don't know me. Don't know if what they said is true. Is it? Did you steal? Commit fraud? She lifted her chin. My husband gambled, lost everything we had and then some. When he died, the people he owed came calling, said I could work off the debt in their establishment. When I refused, they decided I'd stolen from them, made up charges to make it legal. Dane nodded as if this confirmed something. Thought it might be something like that. Wade's got a reputation. The kind of men he works for don't hunt women over petty theft. That still doesn't explain why you helped me. He moved to the fireplace, added a log, stirred the embers. I got my reasons. But they don't matter right now. What matters is you got a decision to make. What decision? Wade's not going to stop looking. You're on foot. You've got no supplies, no money, and winter's setting in hard. You won't last a week out there. Maybe not even a night. He turned to face her. You need protection, shelter, a reason for being here that'll make people stop asking questions. You said you had a proposal. I did. Dane's expression was unreadable. Marriage. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Eliza actually laughed, couldn't help it. You can't be serious. Dead serious. You don't know me. I don't know you. We met 15 minutes ago. I know enough. He counted off on his fingers. You're desperate enough to knock on a stranger's door in the middle of nowhere. Smart enough to run when you needed to. Brave enough, or foolish enough, hard to say which, to ask for work instead of just begging. And you told the truth when you could have lied, even knowing it might cost you. That's not knowing someone. That's barely acquaintance. Maybe, but I've known plenty of people longer who I knew less about what they were made of. He crossed his arms. Here's the situation. I need a wife. Need? This ranch is 1,500 acres. I work it alone except for 3 hired hands who come and go. I'm 34 years old and I'm tired of cooking my own meals and mending my own clothes and coming home to an empty house every night. Been meaning to find a wife for 2 years now. Haven't gotten around to it. So you're proposing to the first desperate woman who shows up at your door? No, I'm offering a solution that benefits both of us. You need protection, a place to stay, a legitimate reason for being here. I need a partner to help run this place. Marriage makes it legal and permanent. Stops people from asking questions. Eliza shook her head, trying to process this. You're talking about a business arrangement. Exactly. There was something almost relieved in his voice. A partnership. I'm not asking for... The marriage would be legal, but we'd have separate rooms. You'd have your space, I'd have mine. No expectations beyond what we agree to. And what would we agree to? You help run the household, learn the ranch work, pull your weight. In return, you get shelter, food, protection, and a share in everything we build here. If it doesn't work out, if you hate it or want to leave, we can discuss terms then. But for now, for the winter at least, you'd be safe. No one would question a rancher's wife. Wade and his kind would have to leave you alone. It was insane, completely, absolutely insane. Marry a man she'd just met, trust her safety, her future, to a stranger's word. And yet, Eliza looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. The neatly stacked wood, the clean floors, the rifle properly maintained and carefully placed. Everything spoke of discipline, order, a man who kept his word because his word was all he had out here. Why me? She asked quietly. Really, you could find someone appropriate. Someone who knows how to run a ranch, who wouldn't need to be taught everything. Dane was quiet for a long moment. You know what the worst thing about this frontier is? Isn't the cold or the isolation or even the violence. It's that everyone's always pretending to be tougher, meaner, harder than they are, pretending they don't need help, pretending they chose this instead of running from something worse. He met her eyes. You didn't pretend. You showed up frozen and desperate, and you asked for work, not charity. Most people would have begged. You offered value. I don't have any value. You saw that yourself. You're still standing. After 3 weeks running, after losing everything, after nearly freezing to death, you're still standing. That's value. That's the kind of person who survives out here. Eliza wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe this could work. That she could trust this strange, stern man who'd lied to bounty hunters for a woman he'd never met. But trust had cost her everything before. I need time to think, she said. You have until morning. Wade will double back, probably bring others. If you're still here and you're not my wife, I won't be able to protect you. They'll have the law on their side, and I can't fight that. And if I say yes, then first light, we ride to town. Find the circuit judge or the preacher, whoever's available. Make it legal. Wade shows up after that. He'll be dealing with a married woman, and that's a different situation entirely. He could still take me, still claim I owe debts. He could try, but taking a rancher's wife, that's when I get involved, and Wade knows I don't get involved lightly. Something hard edged into Dane's voice. I've built something here. Got a reputation for being fair, but not soft. People know I protect what's mine. You become my wife. You become mine to protect. That means something in this territory. The way he said mine should have frightened her. Should have sounded like ownership, possession, all the things she'd run from. Instead, it sounded like responsibility, like a promise. I don't love you, Eliza said bluntly. I don't love you either. Not sure I believe in that kind of love anymore. Dane shrugged. But I believe in partnership, shared goals, mutual respect earned over time. That's a better foundation than romance any day. You're a cynic. I'm a realist, and you are too, or you wouldn't be considering this. He was right. She was considering it, was already weighing the options, calculating the odds. Stay here, marry this stranger, build a life from nothing, or run again. Hope she made it to the next town before Wade caught up, before the cold killed her, before she collapsed from exhaustion and hunger. Some choice. Separate rooms, she said slowly. My own space. Yes. And if it doesn't work, if I want to leave, we'll figure it out. I won't keep you prisoner, if that's what you're asking, but I'll need time to find another arrangement. Can't run this place alone forever. How long? Give it until spring, 4 months. If you want to leave then, we'll discuss divorce, settlement, whatever's fair. But until then, you commit. Full partnership. No running at the first sign of trouble. 4 months. It seemed both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. 4 months to learn a completely different life, to prove herself to this man and his ranch hands and whoever else might question her presence here. 4 months to become someone new. Or 4 months of safety, while she figured out what came next. Eliza looked at the fire, at the snow still falling beyond the window, at Dane Keller's weathered face. He wasn't handsome, too rough for that, too severe, but there was something steady about him, something that felt like bedrock. "I'll want terms," she said, "in writing." For the first time, something like approval flickered across his face. "Smart. We'll write them up tomorrow before we see the judge." "What terms?" "My own space, like you said, access to a horse if I need to leave in an emergency, and—" She hesitated. "Teaching. I don't know anything about ranching. I'll need to learn, and I'll need patience while I do." "Done. Anything else?" "If I fail, if I can't do the work, can't handle it, you let me go. No arguments, no trying to force me to stay." Dane extended his hand. "If you genuinely can't do it, yes. But if you're just scared or frustrated, then we talk first. Give each other honest chances, agreed?" Eliza looked at his hand. Calloused, scarred, the hand of a man who'd built everything he had with his own labor. She thought about her husband's hands, soft, always reaching for cards, for whiskey, for anything that would let him avoid real work. Thought about the hands of the men who'd come after her, grabbing, demanding, taking. This hand was offering, asking, waiting. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, completely engulfing hers. "Agreed." "Then get some sleep. We ride at dawn." He released her hand and moved toward a door on the far side of the room. "You can have my bed tonight. I'll take the chair." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You're exhausted, half frozen, and tomorrow's going to be a long day. Take the bed. It's not a discussion." Too tired to argue, Eliza nodded. She followed him to the small bedroom, barely more than a closet with a bed, a trunk, and a washstand. Everything meticulously neat, almost military in its precision. "There's water in the pitcher. It's cold, but there's soap if you want to wash up. Extra blankets in the trunk." He paused at the door. "Eliza?" "Yes?" "You made the right choice, coming here, saying yes. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." "How can you know that?" "Because the alternative was dying, and you're not the type to die quiet." He closed the door before she could respond, leaving her alone in the small room. Eliza sank onto the bed, a real bed, the first she'd seen in weeks, and felt something crack inside her, not breaking, but shifting, like ice giving way to spring thaw. She didn't cry. She was too tired for tears, too numb for real emotion. Instead, she just sat there, listening to Dane move around in the outer room, the sound of wood being added to the fire, a chair scraping across the floor. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the sounds of a life that could be hers if she was brave enough or desperate enough to reach for it. Tomorrow she'd marry a stranger. Tomorrow she'd become someone new, someone with a different name, a different story, a different future. Tonight, she was still Eliza Cross, fugitive and widow, running from a past that refused to let her go. But maybe, just maybe, by tomorrow night, she could start becoming someone else, someone who stayed. The sky was still dark when Dane knocked on the bedroom door. "Time to move. Want to get to town before full light." Eliza had barely slept, drifting in and out of exhausted half-dreams. She dressed quickly in her stained, torn clothes, the only ones she had, and emerged to find Dane waiting with a bundle. "Found some clothes that might fit. Belonged to my sister before she headed east." He handed her a simple dress, a heavy coat, sturdy boots. "Not fancy, but they're warm and whole." The dress was plain brown wool, worn but well made. The coat was lined with sheepskin. The boots were only slightly too large. Eliza changed quickly, feeling almost human again in clean, intact clothing. "Thank you," she said quietly. Dane just nodded and handed her a plate. Bacon, eggs, bread, real food, hot and plentiful. Eliza tried to eat slowly, maintain some dignity, but hunger won out. She cleaned the plate in minutes. "When's the last time you ate?" Dane asked. "Day before yesterday. Found some berries." His jaw tightened, but he didn't comment, just poured her more coffee and pushed the breadbasket closer. "Eat your fill. It's a 2-hour ride to town." By the time they left, dawn was breaking gray and cold over the mountains. Dane saddled 2 horses with quick efficiency, helped Eliza mount, and they set off across the frozen landscape. The ride was brutal. Wind cut through even the heavy coat, and Eliza had to concentrate on staying in the saddle, on not falling behind. Dane set a steady pace, not slow but not punishing either, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was managing. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say that the wind wouldn't steal, and Eliza was grateful for the silence. It gave her time to think, to process what she was about to do. Marry a stranger, bind her fate to his, trust her survival to a man she'd known less than 12 hours. Insane. Absolutely insane. And yet, what choice did she have? Wade wouldn't stop looking. Others would join the hunt. Without money, without connections, without anywhere to run, she'd be caught within days. Weeks at most. This way, at least, she had a chance. A slim, terrifying chance at something like survival. The town, if it could be called that, consisted of maybe 20 buildings clustered around a main street. General store, saloon, blacksmith, a few houses. At the far end, a small church with a crooked steeple. Dane led them directly to the church and dismounted. "Preacher here owes me a favor. He'll do it quiet, no questions." "What kind of favor?" "The kind where I didn't let the bank foreclose on the church last winter." He tied the horses and offered Eliza his hand. "Ready?" No, she wasn't ready, would never be ready. But ready didn't matter anymore. "Yes." The preacher was a small, nervous man named Hutchins who took one look at Dane's face and asked no questions beyond the legally required ones. The ceremony lasted maybe 5 minutes. Eliza spoke her vows in a voice that didn't sound like hers, slipped a plain iron band onto her finger, when had Dane gotten a ring, and became Mrs. Keller in less time than it took to brew coffee. "You'll want witnesses," Hutchins said, "for the certificate to be legal." Dane nodded and stepped outside, returning moments later with 2 men from the street, a shopkeeper and a ranch hand, both of whom looked curious but asked nothing. They signed, Hutchins signed, and it was done. Legal, binding, permanent, until death or divorce made it otherwise. "Congratulations," Hutchins said weakly. "May your union be blessed." Outside, the sun had fully risen, painting the snow-covered street in shades of pink and gold. Eliza stood on the church steps, looking at the ring on her finger, feeling nothing. No joy, no relief, just a vast, empty numbness. "We should get back," Dane said, "before the weather turns." "Wait," Eliza turned to him. "The terms. We agreed to write them down." "Right." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Wrote them up last night. Look them over, make sure I got everything." The paper was covered in neat, precise handwriting. Terms of partnership, Dane Keller and Eliza Keller 1. Separate living quarters. Privacy respected by both parties. 2. E. Keller, to have access to horse. Supplies for emergency departure 3. D. Keller, to provide instruction in ranch work with patience and without ridicule 4. Trial period of 4 months until April 1st. If E. Keller wishes to leave at that time, divorce proceedings to begin with fair settlement 5. Both parties commit to honest communication and good faith effort 6. No physical harm or threat thereof permitted by either party 7. Financial matters to be discussed and decided jointly. 8. Either party may request modification of terms with mutual agreement. Below that, Dane had signed his name. He offered her the pencil. Eliza read it 3 times, looking for traps, hidden meanings, anything that would turn this into another cage. But the terms were exactly what they'd discussed. Fair, clear, unambiguous. She signed. "All right then," Dane said, folding the paper and tucking it back in his coat. "Now we get back." The ride home was faster, Dane pushing the pace as clouds gathered on the horizon. They made it back to the ranch just as the first fat snowflakes began to fall. Inside, Dane immediately set about building up the fire. "Storm's coming. Big one by the look of it. We'll be snowed in for a few days, probably." Wonderful. Trapped in a small house with a man she'd just married and barely knew. Eliza suppressed a hysterical laugh. "I'll show you around properly," Dane continued, apparently oblivious to her inner panic. "Kitchen's through there. Pantry's stocked. We'll need to ration a bit if the storm's bad, but we won't starve. Barn's about 50 yards north. Got 3 horses, 20 cattle in the near pasture, chickens in the coop attached to the barn. He moved through the house, pointing out supplies, explaining systems. Eliza tried to focus, to remember, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. The adrenaline that had carried her through the ceremony, the ride, was draining away, leaving her hollow. "You're dead on your feet," Dane said, stopping mid-explanation. "Rest first. Learning can wait." "No." Eliza straightened. "No. I need to start earning my keep. What can I do? What needs doing?" "What needs doing is you need sleep. Real sleep, more than 4 hours. You're no use to anyone falling over." "I'm not—" "Eliza." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You've been running for 3 weeks. You got married this morning. You rode 4 hours in freezing cold. Your body's been running on fear and stubbornness, and now it's done. Sleep. That's an order. You can't order me around. I'm your partner and your husband, and I'm telling you that what this partnership needs right now is for you to rest. We can argue about authority later. Right now, sleep." She wanted to fight. Wanted to prove she was strong, capable, not some fragile thing that needed coddling. But the bed was right there, and she was so tired, and maybe, just this once, it would be okay to stop pushing. "A few hours," she conceded. "As many as you need." Eliza retreated to the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. She meant to stay awake, to think through everything that had happened, to plan her next moves. She was asleep in seconds. When she woke, it was dark, and the storm was howling outside with the fury of a living thing. Snow pelted the windows, and wind shrieked around the corners of the house. Eliza could hear it even through the thick walls, a constant roar that sounded like the end of the world. She emerged from the bedroom to find Dane at the table, writing in a ledger by lantern light. He looked up when she entered. "Storm hit hard. We're snowed in until it breaks." "How long will that be?" "Day, maybe 2. Hard to say." He gestured to the stove. "There's stew. Help yourself." The stew was simple: beef, potatoes, carrots, but hot and filling. Eliza ate standing up, looking around the small house that was now, impossibly, her home. "I can cook," she said abruptly. "Tomorrow. I can make meals." Dane looked up from his ledger. "You said you could cook. Can you actually, or was that wishful thinking?" Honesty or pride? Eliza chose honesty. "I can make basic things. Nothing fancy. My husband preferred eating in restaurants, so I never—" "Basic is fine. Better than what I make, probably. I can teach you the rest." "You can cook?" "Had to learn. Been on my own out here for 8 years. He returned to his ledger. "There's bread in the box, coffee on the stove. Make yourself at home." Make yourself at home. As if it were that simple. As if she could just decide this was home and make it so. Eliza poured coffee and sat across from him, watching him work. His hands were steady, his writing precise. Everything about him radiated competence, control, a kind of certainty she envied. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you really do this? Help me. Marry me. What do you get out of it besides someone who burns your meals and doesn't know a cow from a horse?" Dane was quiet for a long moment, his pen pausing over the page. "You want the truth?" "Always." "I was lonely." He said it simply, without embarrassment. Been lonely for years. Told myself it didn't matter, that I chose this life, that isolation was the price of independence. But it does matter. Coming home to an empty house every night, eating alone, talking to no one but hired hands and the occasional trader, it wears on you, makes you hard in ways that aren't good. "So you married me for company?" "For partnership," he corrected. "There's a difference. I don't need someone to talk at. I need someone working beside me, building something together. That's what I lost when my family headed east. That sense of shared purpose." "Your family left you here?" "Wasn't like that. My father wanted to try farming in Ohio, thought the land would be easier. My sister wanted civilization, schools, society. I wanted—" He gestured at the walls, the windows beyond which the storm raged. "This, space, freedom, something that was mine. We parted on good terms, but they left, and I stayed. And now you're stuck with me instead." "I'm not stuck with anyone, neither are you. We made a choice, both of us. We've got 4 months to see if it was the right one." The storm howled louder, rattling the windows. Eliza wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. What happens if Wade comes back? He won't, not in this storm. And after that, you're a married woman on legal record. He'd need more than debt collector's word to touch you. He could lie, forge documents. He could, but he won't. Too much trouble for too little gain. Men like Wade are bullies, not crusaders. They chase easy targets. You're not easy anymore. Eliza wanted to believe that, wanted to feel safe, but safety was something she'd stopped believing in months ago. As if reading her thoughts, Dane closed his ledger and looked at her directly. I know you don't trust this, don't trust me. That's smart. But here's what I can promise you. I keep my word. I said I'd protect you, teach you, give you a fair chance. I will. And I said you could leave if it doesn't work. I'll honor that too. Why should I believe you? Because out here, a man's word is all he's got. Break it, and you've got nothing. No reputation, no trust, no way to do business or build anything lasting. I've spent 8 years building something I'm proud of. I'm not going to destroy that by lying to my wife. My wife. The word still sounded foreign, impossible. I'm going to fail, Eliza said quietly, at the ranch work, at being the kind of partner you need. I don't know anything about this life. Then you'll learn, same as I did, same as everyone out here does. Dane stood, stretching. Nobody's born knowing how to survive the frontier. We all stumble through it, make mistakes, learn, or die. You've made it this far. That counts for something. I got lucky. Found your door instead of freezing. Maybe, or maybe you kept going when most people would have given up. Hard to say which. He moved toward his bedroom, the one he'd given up for her, she realized. Where was he sleeping? Get some more rest. Tomorrow, if the storm breaks, I'll start teaching you the basics. How to feed the animals, collect eggs, things that need doing regardless of weather. Dane? He paused at the door. Thank you, for all of it. I know I haven't said that properly. You don't owe me thanks. We're partners now. We help each other. That's how it works. He disappeared into the room, leaving Eliza alone with the fire and the storm and the terrifying reality of what she'd done. She was married to a stranger, living in the middle of nowhere with no way out and no idea what came next. It should have felt like a trap, should have felt like jumping from one prison to another. Instead, impossibly, it felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in months. Eliza finished her coffee and returned to bed. Outside, the storm raged on, burying the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled, and somewhere in another room, Dane Keller slept, the man who'd lied to bounty hunters, offered marriage to a fugitive, and promised her a chance at something like freedom. She didn't love him, barely knew him, didn't trust him, not really. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that might eventually become hope. And for tonight, in this small house on the brutal frontier, that was enough. The storm would break eventually. Wade might come back. The ranch work might prove impossible. The marriage might fail spectacularly. But tonight, she was safe, warm, fed, legal. Tonight, she was Eliza Keller. And tomorrow, she'd start learning what that meant. The storm broke on the third day, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of snow that glittered like broken glass in the weak winter sun. Eliza stood at the window, watching Dane dig a path from the house to the barn, his breath coming in white clouds, his movements efficient and tireless. He'd been at it since first light, and the sun was already climbing toward noon. She should help, should be out there proving her worth. Instead, she was inside, staring at the ruins of what was supposed to be breakfast. The eggs were burned black on one side, raw on the other. The bacon had somehow turned to charcoal while remaining frozen in the middle. The biscuits, if they could be called that, sat on the counter like lumps of granite. Eliza had followed the instructions Dane had written out for her exactly, measured everything precisely, and still managed to create something inedible. The door opened, bringing a blast of cold air and Dane stamping snow from his boots. He took one look at the stove and stopped. How did you burn water? He asked, nodding at the pot where she'd tried to boil coffee. I don't know. I turned my back for a minute and it just... Eliza gestured helplessly at the disaster. I told you I could cook basic things. Apparently I lied. Dane crossed to the stove, examining the wreckage with the focused attention of a general surveying a battlefield. The heat's too high, way too high. This stove runs hotter than city stoves. You have to adjust for that. You didn't mention that in your instructions. Didn't think I had to. Most people figure it out after the first time. He caught her expression and softened. Sorry, that came out wrong. Here, let me show you. He moved beside her, adjusting the damper, explaining the airflow, demonstrating how to test the temperature with his hand held above the surface. Eliza tried to focus on his words, but all she could think was how close he was standing, how she could smell wood smoke and leather and something else, something clean and masculine that made her suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd stood this close to any man. She stepped back abruptly. I'll try again tomorrow. Or you could try again now. Food's already wasted. Might as well learn from it. I need air. I've been inside for 3 days. Dane studied her face, seeing something there that made him nod. Fair enough. Get your coat. I'll show you the barn, introduce you to the livestock. Probably past time anyway. Outside, the cold hit like a physical blow. Eliza gasped, her lungs seizing, but pushed forward, following Dane's path through the snow. Her boots, still slightly too large, kept slipping, and she had to concentrate on every step to avoid falling. The barn was warmer, heated by the bodies of the animals inside. 3 horses occupied the stalls on the right, 20 cattle clustered on the left, and in a separate section, a dozen chickens pecked and clucked around a makeshift coop. This is Ranger, Dane said, stopping at the first stall where a large bay horse regarded them with intelligent eyes. My primary mount. Steadiest horse I've ever owned. Next to him is Storm. She's temperamental but fast when you need speed, and that one's Duchess. She's yours now. Mine? Part of our agreement. You need access to a horse. Duchess is gentle, good for someone still learning to ride properly. Eliza approached the stall carefully. Duchess was smaller than the other 2, a pretty gray mare with a white blaze down her face. She nickered softly and pushed her nose toward Eliza's outstretched hand. She likes you, Dane observed. That's good. Means she'll be patient while you learn. Learn what exactly? Everything. How to saddle her, bridle her, ride for more than 2 hours without falling off. He moved down the barn, pointing out feed bins, water troughs, explaining the daily routine. Horses get fed twice a day, morning and evening. Cattle get hay morning and night, plus whatever they can graze if the snow's not too deep. Chickens need grain, fresh water, eggs collected daily. It was overwhelming. Too much information, delivered too fast, and Eliza felt her mind starting to shut down, unable to process anymore. I can't remember all this, she said flatly. Don't have to. I wrote it down. Dane pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Schedule, amounts, everything you need. Follow this until it becomes automatic. And if I mess up, forget something? Then the animals remind you real quick. Cattle bellow when they're hungry, chickens squawk when they need water, horses kick their stalls. You'll figure it out. He made it sound simple. Made everything sound simple, like survival was just a matter of following instructions and common sense. But Eliza knew better. Knew that between instruction and execution lay a vast space where everything could go wrong. Come on, Dane said. I'll show you how to collect eggs. That's easy enough to start with. Easy. Right. Eliza followed him to the chicken coop, watching as he demonstrated how to reach under the hens, how to move slowly so they didn't panic, how to cradle the eggs so they didn't break. Your turn. Eliza approached the nearest hen, a fat brown thing that regarded her with suspicious eyes. She reached out slowly, just like Dane had shown her, and the hen exploded in a fury of feathers and indignant squawking, pecking viciously at her hand. Ow! It attacked me! You moved too fast. Spooked her. Try again. Slower. It's going to peck me again. Probably. Chickens are mean when they're scared, but you're tougher than a chicken, aren't you? It was a challenge, clear as day, and Eliza felt something stubborn ignite in her chest. She was not going to be defeated by poultry, not after everything she'd survived. She tried again, got pecked again. Tried a third time and finally managed to snag an egg, warm and perfect, from beneath the hostile hen. Victory surged through her, disproportionate to the achievement but real nonetheless. There, Dane said, something like approval in his voice. See? Not so hard once you commit to it. They collected the rest of the eggs together, Eliza getting pecked twice more, but also successfully retrieving 4 eggs on her own. By the time they finished, her hands were scratched and sore, but she'd filled half the basket. "That's enough for today," Dane said. "We'll start on the other tasks tomorrow. One thing at a time." Back in the house, Eliza washed the scratches and stared at her hands. They were already changing, rougher, reddened by cold and work. City hands becoming ranch hands, soft becoming hard. "It gets easier," Dane said from behind her. "Your body adapts. Right now everything hurts because your muscles aren't used to this kind of work. Give it a week, 2 weeks, and it'll feel different." "Everything hurts," Eliza admitted. "Places I didn't even know could hurt. Hot bath helps. I'll heat water." He moved to the stove, filling the large pot without asking if she wanted the bath, just assuming, correctly, that she did. It was strange, this casual intimacy, someone anticipating her needs and meeting them without making it into a transaction or debt. While the water heated, Eliza attempted to salvage dinner. She kept the stove temperature lower this time, watched the food more carefully, and managed to produce something that, while not delicious, was at least edible. Small victory, but she'd take it. They ate in silence, the awkwardness of shared space settling between them. 3 days of being snowed in together had created a strange familiarity. They knew each other's rhythms now, when to talk and when to stay quiet, how to move around each other in the small house without collision. But it was surface knowledge, the kind that came from proximity, not from any real understanding. "Tell me about your husband," Dane said abruptly. Eliza's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Why?" "Because he's part of your story, and I don't know anything about him except that he died and left you in debt. Seems like something I should know, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" "We're married, partners. Eventually you're going to need to talk about it, and eventually might as well be now." Eliza set down her fork, her appetite vanishing. "His name was Thomas Cross. I met him in Philadelphia. He was charming, well-dressed, seemed successful. I was young and stupid and believed everything he told me." "How young?" 18. He was 32. Dane's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just waited for her to continue. "We married quickly, 3 months after we met. I thought I was lucky, that I'd found someone who loved me, wanted to take care of me. My parents were dead. I had no other family, and Thomas seemed like safety." She laughed bitterly. "Shows what I knew. When did it change?" "About 6 months in. That's when the debt started. Small at first, a few dollars here and there, I owe us to friends. He said it was temporary, that a business deal was about to come through. I believed him, kept believing him even as the debts got bigger, even as we moved to cheaper and cheaper lodgings, even as everything we owned ended up in pawn shops. Gambling? Poker, horses, dice, anything with stakes. He couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. Every loss was just one win away from being recovered. Every win was proof he had a system, a strategy." Eliza stared at her plate. "I tried to leave twice. Both times he found me, convinced me to come back, said he'd change. I believed him because I wanted to, because admitting I'd made a mistake felt worse than staying in a failing marriage. And then he died. Cheated at cards with the wrong people. They caught him, and he ran. Tried to steal a horse to get away and fell, broke his neck." She met Dane's eyes. "They said it was an accident, but I don't know. Don't care, really. He was dead, and suddenly all his debts became mine. The men he owed decided I could work it off in their establishment. When I refused, they made up charges to force my hand. So you ran. What else could I do? Stay and let them—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I took what little money I could scrape together, bought a train ticket west, and kept moving until the money ran out. Then I took a horse that didn't exactly belong to me and kept running." "You stole a horse?" "I left money. Not enough, probably, but all I had. I figured that was better than nothing." Dane was quiet for a long moment. "That why you asked for work instead of charity? Because you'd already taken more than you wanted to?" "Maybe. I don't know. I'm tired of owing people. Tired of being in debt, being owned, being powerless. Even asking for help feels like weakness." "It's not weakness. It's survival." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, I just traded one form of dependence for another. I'm here because I had no other choice, and you know it. That's true, Dane said, surprising her with his honesty. But there's a difference between dependence born from desperation and partnership built from mutual benefit. Right now, yes, you need me more than I need you. But that'll change as you learn, as you become capable. Eventually, we'll be equals in this. That's the goal. And if we never get there, if I never become capable enough, then we deal with it when it happens. But I think you will. You've got something most people don't. What's that? You're still fighting. Most people in your situation would have given up, found some way to make peace with whatever horror was chasing them. But you didn't. You fought, ran, risked everything for the chance at something better. That's not weakness. That's strength most people can't even imagine. Eliza wanted to believe him. Wanted to see herself as strong instead of desperate, brave instead of terrified. But all she felt was tired, bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond physical weariness into something darker. I'm going to fail you, she said quietly. Fail this. I'm going to wake up one morning and realize I can't do it, and I'm going to want to run again. Probably, Dane agreed. And when that happens, we'll talk. Figure out if it's real failure or just fear talking. But Eliza? He waited until she met his eyes. Everyone wants to run sometimes. The frontier's brutal, the work's hard, the isolation wears on you. There are days I want to walk away from all of it, go back east, find an easier life. But I don't. Because what we're building here matters more than comfort. What are we building? Something that's ours. Something no one can take away because we built it with our own hands, our own labor, our own will. That's freedom, real freedom, and it's worth fighting for. The water was hot now, steam rising from the pot. Dane carried it to the small washroom and set it beside the tub without another word, giving her privacy. Eliza bathed quickly, scrubbing away 3 days of sweat and grime, letting the heat soak into her aching muscles. When she emerged, Dane was at the table again, working on his ledgers by lamplight. Your turn, she said. Turn for what? To tell me something about yourself. Seems only fair. Dane considered this, then nodded slowly. What do you want to know? Why did you stay? When your family left, why didn't you go with them? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I needed to prove something. Prove what? That I could make it on my own. That I wasn't weak. He said it simply, without drama, but Eliza heard something underneath the words. Old pain, old anger. My father didn't think I could do it. Said this land was too hard, that I'd fail and come crawling back within a year. So I stayed. Built this place from nothing, proved him wrong. Have you talked to him since? Letters, once a year or so. He never asks how the ranch is doing, never acknowledges that I succeeded. Doesn't matter. I know. And that's enough. Is it? Dane looked up from his ledger, meeting her eyes. Has to be. Can't build your life around someone else's approval. That's a trap just as bad as any other. Eliza thought about Thomas, about how much of her life had been shaped by trying to please him, save him, fix him. Years wasted on someone else's approval, someone else's dreams, someone else's failures. I won't do that again, she said. Make myself small for someone else's comfort. Good. I don't want you small. I want you capable, strong, equal. That's the only kind of partner worth having. It was the most direct thing he'd said to her, and it hung in the air between them like a promise. The next morning, Eliza woke before dawn to the sound of Dane moving around the house. She dressed quickly and emerged to find him preparing to head out. Where are you going? North pasture. Need to check on the cattle, make sure none of them got injured or separated in the storm. Probably be gone most of the day. I'll come with you. Dane paused, his hand on the door. It's a hard ride. Long, cold, not easy for someone who's not used to it. I need to learn sometime. Might as well be today. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or approval. All right, saddle up Duchess while I load supplies. We leave in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Eliza had never saddled a horse in her life, but she wasn't about to admit that now. She hurried to the barn, pulled out the tack, and stared at the confusing array of leather and metal. How hard could it be? Very hard, as it turned out. By the time Dane found her, she'd managed to get the blanket on backwards, The bridle tangled and the saddle halfway on before Duchess had simply walked away, leaving Eliza holding the whole mess. Dane didn't laugh, didn't even smile. He just quietly untangled everything, showed her the correct way, explained each piece and its purpose, then made her do it herself while he watched. It took 3 tries, but eventually Duchess stood properly tacked, and Eliza had learned something new. "Not bad," Dane said. "You'll get faster with practice." They rode out as the sun broke over the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. The beauty was savage, unforgiving, the kind that killed you if you weren't careful. Eliza kept Duchess close to Ranger, following Dane's lead, trying not to think about how far they were getting from the house, how isolated they were becoming. 2 hours in, they found the first problem. 5 cattle separated from the main herd, trapped in a ravine by drifted snow. They were cold, scared, and dangerously weak. "We need to get them out," Dane said, already dismounting. "If they stay down there another night, they'll die." "How do we get them out?" "Dig a path, lead them up. It'll take a few hours." He handed her a shovel. "You take the right side, I'll take the left. We meet in the middle." The work was brutal. Eliza's muscles screamed with every shovelful of snow, her hands blistered inside her gloves. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The cold bit through her coat, the wind threw snow in her face, and more than once she wanted to stop, to say she couldn't do it. But Dane was working beside her, steady and tireless, and she'd be damned if she quit while he kept going. They dug for 3 hours straight, barely speaking, just working. Finally, they'd cleared a path wide enough for the cattle to climb. Dane went down into the ravine, moving among the animals with calm confidence, checking them for injuries, coaxing them toward the path. One of the cows, a large black beast with wild eyes, refused to move. Dane tried pulling, pushing, sweet-talking. Nothing worked. The animal just stood there, stubborn and terrified, while the others climbed to safety. "Damn it," Dane muttered. "She's too scared, thinks the path's another trap." "What do we do?" "I go behind, drive her forward. You stand at the top, make sure she doesn't bolt sideways when she reaches the top." "What if she charges me?" "Don't let her." He was already moving into position. "Ready?" Eliza wanted to say no, wanted to confess she had no idea how to stop a panicked cow, wanted to admit this was beyond her capabilities. Instead, she climbed to the top of the path and braced herself. "Now!" Dane shouted. The cow came up the path in a terrified rush, eyes rolling, hooves churning snow. Eliza stood her ground, arms spread wide, making herself as large and intimidating as possible. The cow saw her, tried to veer left, and Eliza moved with her, blocking the escape, forcing the animal back toward the herd. For a moment they stood frozen, woman and beast neither willing to back down. Then the cow broke, turning away from Eliza and trotting toward the other cattle, defeated. Eliza's knees nearly gave out. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. But she'd done it, faced down a half-ton of panicked animal, and won. Dane climbed out of the ravine, his face flushed with cold and exertion. "That was well done. Most people would have run." "I wanted to." "But you didn't. That's what matters." They drove the cattle back to the main herd, working in silent coordination that felt almost natural. By the time they turned for home, the sun was already sinking, painting the snow in shades of purple and orange. "We'll camp here," Dane said, stopping in a sheltered spot beneath a stand of pines. "Too dark to ride safely, and the horses need rest." "Camp? Out here? You have a problem with that?" Eliza looked around at the vast emptiness, the gathering darkness, the cold that was already settling like a physical weight. "No," she lied. "No problem." Dane made camp with practiced efficiency, clearing a spot, building a fire, setting up a basic shelter. Eliza tried to help, but mostly just got in the way, earning gentle corrections and quiet instructions. They ate cold rations in silence, huddled close to the fire while night settled around them. Above, stars appeared in impossible profusion, more stars than Eliza had ever seen, hard bright points against the endless dark. "You did good today," Dane said suddenly. "Better than I expected. I nearly dropped the shovel 6 times. But you didn't. And when that cow came at you, you stood your ground. That takes courage. It takes stupidity. I had no idea what I was doing. Neither does anyone the first time. But you didn't freeze, didn't run, didn't let fear win. That's what matters out here. Not whether you know what you're doing, but whether you do it anyway. Eliza stared into the fire, watching sparks spiral up into the darkness. I'm terrified, she admitted. All the time. Terrified I'll fail, that I'll get someone killed, that I'll wake up one morning and realize I can't do this. That's called being human. Fear doesn't make you weak. Giving in to fear does. How do you not give in? By having something worth being brave for. The ranch, the animals, the life I'm building, that's worth more than comfort, worth more than safety. So when fear shows up, I acknowledge it, then do what needs doing anyway. And that works for you? Most days. Some days I fake it until I believe it, but either way, the work gets done. The fire crackled, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, long, lonely, achingly sad. Eliza shivered despite the heat. Tell me it gets easier, she said quietly. Tell me there's a point where I'll wake up and feel like I belong here, like I know what I'm doing. It gets different, Dane said. Not easier necessarily, but you get stronger. You get smarter. You learn what you can control and what you have to accept. And eventually, yes, you wake up one day and realize you've become someone who can do this. Someone who does do this. When? Different for everyone. Took me about 2 years to stop feeling like an imposter, stop waiting for the whole thing to collapse. Might be faster for you, might be slower, no way to know except to keep going. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire, the wind, the vast quiet of the wilderness. Eliza felt something shifting inside her. Not hope, exactly, but something adjacent to it. The possibility of hope. The idea that maybe, eventually, this could become bearable. Maybe even good. Thank you, she said finally. For today. For teaching me instead of just doing it yourself. You're my partner. Partners teach each other. He poked at the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. Besides, you're going to need to know all this if I get sick or injured. Can't run this place alone. It was the most trust he'd shown her yet. The acknowledgement that he was depending on her, that he needed her to be capable because his survival might depend on it. Eliza felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto her shoulders, heavy and terrifying and strangely welcome. I won't let you down, she said. I know you won't. Not on purpose, anyway. And if you do by accident, we'll fix it and move on. He stood, stretching. Get some sleep. We leave at first light. Eliza settled into her bedroll, listening to Dane move around the camp, banking the fire, checking the horses. The sounds were becoming familiar now, the rhythms of ranch life, the patterns of survival. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept circling back to the day. The digging, the cow, the way Dane had trusted her to do what needed doing. Small victories, maybe, but they felt significant, felt like the beginning of something. Tomorrow she'd fail at something else. Burn breakfast, drop eggs, wokas, fall off her horse. But tomorrow she'd also stand back up, try again, learn from the mistakes. Because that was the deal she'd made. Not just with Dane, but with herself. No more running, no more giving up, no more being the person things happened to. She was going to be the person who made things happen, even if it killed her. Which, out here, it very well might. But at least she'd die trying to build something instead of running from the ruins of her past. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. The man arrived on a Tuesday morning in late February, riding a black horse that looked too expensive for honest work. Eliza saw him first from the barn where she was mucking stalls, a job she'd finally learned to do without Dane hovering nearby to correct her mistakes. 2 months of relentless work had hardened her hands, strengthened her back, and given her a competence she'd never imagined possessing. She could saddle a horse in under 5 minutes now, collect eggs without getting pecked more than once or twice, and even manage simple repairs to tack and fencing. But the sight of that rider made her blood run cold. She didn't recognize him specifically, but she knew the type. The expensive clothes worn like armor, the way he sat his saddle with casual arrogance, the calculating eyes that missed nothing. He was scanning the ranch with the attention of a man appraising property, and Eliza's instinct screamed danger. She backed into the barn, heart hammering, and nearly collided with Dane coming out of the tack room. "There's someone coming," she said, hating how her voice shook. Dane looked past her, his expression hardening when he saw the rider. "Stay here." "Who is it?" "Victor Hale. Owns the Triple H Ranch about 30 miles west. Biggest landowner in the territory." Dane's jaw tightened. And the biggest problem we've got? What does he want? Nothing good. Stay in the barn, Eliza. Don't come out unless I call for you. He strode out to meet Hale, and Eliza moved to the barn door where she could watch without being seen. The two men met in the yard, neither dismounting, neither offering the casual courtesy that usually marked frontier meetings. Keller, Hale said, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. He was older than Dane, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of face that looked distinguished until you saw the meanness in his eyes. Been meaning to pay you a visit. That's so. What brings you all the way out here, Hale? Business, always business. Hale's gaze swept the ranch again, lingering on the barn, the house, the pastures beyond. Nice spread you got here. Must be doing well for yourself. Well enough. What do you want? Direct. I like that. Hale smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'll be direct too. I'm expanding my operation, consolidating holdings in this territory. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer for your land. Not interested. You haven't heard my price. Don't need to. This ranch isn't for sale. Hale's smile thinned. Everything's for sale, Keller. It's just a matter of finding the right price. I'm offering you $3,000. That's more than fair for 1,500 acres this far from town. It's insulting. This land's worth twice that, and we both know it. Is it? Land's only worth what someone will pay, and I'm the only buyer in this territory with that kind of capital. Hale leaned forward in his saddle. Think about it. $3,000, cash money. You could go anywhere, start fresh, buy land somewhere easier. Why break your back out here when you could have an easier life? Because this is my land. I built it from nothing, and I'm keeping it. You built it, yes, but can you hold it? Something dangerous flickered in Hale's expression. This territory's changing, Keller. Small operations like yours are dying out. You need capital to survive the bad years, connections to get fair prices, resources to fight off claim jumpers and rustlers. You've got none of that. How long before one bad winter wipes you out? How long before you can't make payments on your equipment, your stock? I'll manage, always have. You've been lucky. Luck runs out. Hale straightened. I'm offering you a way out before that happens. Take it. No. The word hung in the cold air like a challenge. Hale's expression went flat, and Eliza saw calculation there, cold and merciless. I see you got married, Hale said, changing tactics. Didn't even know you were courting anyone. Must have been sudden. My personal life's none of your concern. Everything in this territory is my concern. I like to know my neighbors, especially when they're making unexpected changes. Hale's gaze drifted toward the barn, and Eliza shrank back, praying he couldn't see her. Word is your wife's from back east. Philadelphia, maybe, running from something. Dane's hand moved to his rifle, still holstered on his saddle, but within easy reach. You got something to say, Hale. Say it plain. Just making conversation. But since you ask, I've got friends in Philadelphia. Friends who know all sorts of interesting things about recent arrivals to the territory. Would hate for any unfortunate information to surface that might complicate your domestic situation. Threat delivered. Eliza felt it like a blade pressed to her throat. Dane's voice went deadly quiet. You threatening my wife? I'm stating facts. Information has a way of spreading, especially information that certain parties might pay good money for. Of course, between friends, such information could stay private. Neighborly courtesy and all. We're not friends. No, we're not. But we could have a business arrangement. You sell me this land, I forget everything I might have heard about Mrs. Keller's past. Everyone wins. Get off my property. Think about my offer, Keller. $3,000 and peace of mind. Better than the alternative. The alternative being? Hale's smile was cold as winter. You don't want to find out. Good day, Keller. I'll be in touch. He wheeled his horse and rode off at a leisurely pace, like a man without a care in the world. Dane stood motionless in the yard, watching until Hale disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned and walked to the barn, his face carved from stone. You heard, he said. It wasn't a question. Most of it. Eliza stepped out of the shadows, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm sorry. I brought this to your door. This isn't about you. Hale's been trying to buy me out for years. You're just his latest excuse. But he knows about Philadelphia, about me running. If he tells Wade, then we deal with it. But we're not giving him this ranch, not for 3,000, not for 10 times that. This land is ours. Is it worth your life? Because that's where this is heading. Men like Hale don't just give up. Dane looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something fierce burning in his eyes. Men like Hale think they can take whatever they want because people are too scared to stand up to them. Been that way my whole life. Big men pushing around small men, taking land, resources, power, because they can. I'm done with it. We're done with it. We? You're my wife, my partner. What threatens you threatens me. What threatens this ranch threatens both of us. So yes, we, unless you want to run again. Did she? The old Eliza would have already been packing, calculating how far she could get before Hale made good on his threats. But 2 months of brutal work, of learning to stand firm against charging cattle and bitter cold in her own failures, had changed something fundamental inside her. I'm tired of running, she said quietly. Tired of letting men like Hale and Wade decide what I get to have, where I get to be. But I don't know how to fight them. Neither do I, not yet. But we'll figure it out. He said it with such certainty, as if sheer will could overcome superior resources and ruthless tactics. Eliza wanted to believe him, wanted to feel that same certainty. Instead, all she felt was the weight of everything she'd brought crashing down on this man who'd offered her sanctuary. Over the next 2 weeks, things started going wrong. Small things at first. A section of fence cut during the night, letting a dozen cattle wander onto neighboring land. Salt lick contaminated with something that made 3 horses sick. A delivery of feed that never arrived, though the supplier swore he'd sent it. Each incident could be explained away as bad luck or honest mistake. Together, they formed a pattern. It's Hale, Dane said, surveying the cut fence with barely controlled fury. Has to be. These aren't accidents. Can you prove it? No, that's the point. He's careful, uses intermediaries, keeps his hands clean. By the time we track down who actually did the damage, the trail's gone cold. So what do? We document everything, keep records, and we watch. He drove a new post into the frozen ground with vicious efficiency. He's trying to bleed us dry, make us desperate enough to sell. We don't give him the satisfaction. But it was hard not to feel desperate as problems multiplied. Feed costs went up suddenly, with suppliers citing shortages that somehow didn't affect Hale's operation. The well pump broke, and the parts to fix it were mysteriously unavailable. Small harassments, each one costing time and money they couldn't afford to lose. And through it all, the winter dragged on, brutal and unforgiving. Eliza threw herself into work, partly to help, partly to avoid thinking about the walls closing in. She learned to mend harnesses, treat minor livestock injuries, navigate the treacherous politics of the general store, where Hale's influence meant every purchase was scrutinized and prices shifted based on who was buying. She also started noticing things. The way certain ranchers avoided Dane in town, crossing the street rather than speak to him. The whispers that stopped when she approached. The cold courtesy from the shopkeeper who used to be friendly. They're scared, Dane explained when she asked. Hale's made it clear that anyone who does business with us risks his displeasure. Most people can't afford that risk. So we're being isolated. Systematically. It's an old tactic. Cut someone off from support, make them vulnerable, then move in for the kill. There has to be someone who'd stand with us. Maybe. But asking them to do it is asking them to risk everything they've built. That's a hard ask. Eliza understood. She'd been on the other side of that calculation, choosing safety over principle because survival mattered more than righteousness. But understanding didn't make the isolation any easier to bear. Then, on a morning in early March, when the first hints of spring were teasing at the edges of winter, everything changed. Eliza was in town buying supplies when she saw him. Thomas's brother, Marcus Cross, standing outside the saloon like a ghost from her past made flesh. He was older than Thomas had been, harder, with the same weak chin hidden behind an elaborate beard and the same calculating eyes. Their gazes met across the street, and Eliza felt the world tilt. She turned and walked quickly toward where she'd tied Duchess, but Marcus was faster. He caught up to her before she could mount, his hand closing around her arm. "Eliza, been looking for you!" She jerked free, heart hammering. "Let me go!" Now that's no way to greet family. We've got business to discuss. We have nothing to discuss. Your brother's dead and his debts aren't mine. Court says different. Thomas left considerable obligations, and as his widow, you're responsible. I've got papers, all legal and proper. Marcus pulled a folded document from his coat. Says here you owe $3,200, plus interest. $3,000, the exact amount Hale had offered for the ranch. Coincidence? Eliza doubted it. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. But your husband does. That rancher you married, Dane Keller. Word is he's got a nice spread, probably worth $5,000-6,000. Sell some of it off, you can pay what you owe. How did you? But she knew. Hale, it had to be. You're working with Victor Hale. Marcus smiled. I'm working for myself, but Mr. Hale and I have mutual interests. He wants your land. I want my money. We both get what we want if you cooperate. And if I don't, then I take this to the territorial judge, get a ruling. Sheriff comes and seizes property to settle the debt. That how you want this to go? Public? Messy? Everyone knowing your business? Eliza's mind raced. $3,000. They didn't have it. Couldn't raise it without selling land or livestock they couldn't afford to lose. Marcus knew it, Hale knew it, and they were using that knowledge like a weapon. I need time, she said. You got a week. After that, I file with the judge. Marcus tipped his hat mockingly. Good seeing you, Eliza. Give my regards to your husband. He walked away, and Eliza stood frozen in the street, the shopping list clutched in her trembling hand. A week, 7 days to find $3,000 or lose everything. She rode home in a daze, barely aware of the miles passing. When she reached the ranch, Dane was working on a new section of fence, his movements efficient and practiced. He looked up when he heard her approach, and whatever he saw on her face made him drop his tools and stride toward her. What happened? She told him. Everything. Marcus, the debt, the week deadline, the obvious connection to Hale. Dane listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each word. They're coordinating, he said when she finished. Hale found Marcus, probably offered him a cut if he came here and applied pressure. 2 fronts, same goal. Can they actually enforce it, the debt? If the papers are legitimate, yes. Court would rule in his favor, authorize seizure of assets. We'd have to sell land to pay it. To Hale, who'd buy it for cheap because he knows we're desperate. Exactly. Dane paced, thinking. We need leverage, something to counter with. We don't have leverage. We barely have time. Then we create it. There are other ranchers in this territory, people who've watched Hale swallow up land for years. Maybe if we can show them he's not invincible, they'd stand with us. You just said asking them to risk themselves was too much. It was when we were just us, but if there's enough of us, strength in numbers, maybe the calculation changes. He stopped pacing, looking at her directly. I know where Hale's vulnerable. The water. What water? The creek that runs through this territory feeds everyone's ranches, including Hale's. He's been trying to claim exclusive rights to it for years, saying his land surrounds the source. If he succeeds, he controls who gets water and who doesn't. Ultimate leverage. So we fight his water claim? We do better. We organize. Get the other ranchers to band together, form a collective to manage water rights. Safety in numbers. Hale can't intimidate all of us at once. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but it was also the first real plan they'd had, and Eliza felt something like hope stirring. How do we start? With the Morrison Ranch, old Tom Morrison's been here longer than Hale, knows everyone, has respect. If we can get him on board, others might follow. They rode out that afternoon to the Morrison place, a sprawling operation that made their ranch look tiny by comparison. Tom Morrison was a grizzled man in his 60s who'd survived 3 wives, countless winters, and every hardship the frontier could throw at him. He listened to Dane's proposal with a skeptical expression, occasionally spitting tobacco juice into a rusted can. You're asking me to go to war with Victor Hale, he said when Dane finished. I'm asking you to protect your water rights before he takes them. Same thing. Hale doesn't like being challenged. People who challenge him tend to have accidents. People who let him run unchecked lose everything anyway. Just slower. Dane leaned forward. How long before he decides your land would look good added to his holdings? How long before he's using the same tactics on you that he's using on me? Maybe, Maybe not. I'm careful, don't give him openings. Neither did I. Didn't matter, he found an opening anyway. Dane's voice was hard. You can wait until he comes for you, or you can stand with me now and maybe we both survive. Your choice. Morrison was quiet for a long time, working his jaw, thinking. Finally, who else you got? Nobody yet. You're the first I'm asking. And if I say no, then I ask the next person, and the next, until someone says yes or I run out of people to ask. Morrison spat again. You got guts, Keller. Stupid guts, but guts. All right, I'll hear you out. Get 5 other ranchers on board, substantial ones, and I'll consider it. But I ain't leading this charge. I'll support it, but you're the one putting your neck out. Fair enough. Over the next 3 days, Eliza and Dane rode across the territory, visiting every rancher who might listen. Some slammed doors in their faces. Others heard them out, but ultimately said no, too scared of Hale's retribution. A few were interested but wanted to wait, see how things developed. But some said yes. James Garrett, a taciturn man who'd lost land to Hale 5 years ago and was still bitter about it. Sarah Chen, a widow running her late husband's ranch with fierce competence, who was tired of Hale's unwanted acquisition attempts. The Lopez brothers, young and angry and eager to prove themselves. And finally, Henry Walsh, whose operation was almost as large as Morrison's, and who had his own grudges against Hale. 5 ranchers plus Morrison and themselves. 7 operations representing maybe a third of the independent ranches in the territory. Not a majority, but enough to be a threat. They met in Morrison's barn on the 6th night, gathering in secret like revolutionaries. Eliza stood beside Dane, feeling distinctly out of place among these weathered, experienced ranchers, but nobody questioned her presence. Here's what I'm proposing, Dane said, laying out a map on a rough table. We form an alliance, pool our resources for defense, coordinate on water rights, support each other when Hale tries his intimidation tactics. We're stronger together than we are separately. And when Hale retaliates, Walsh asked, because he will. We stand firm. Make it clear that coming after one of us means coming after all of us. He's powerful, but he can't fight everyone at once. He's got money, hired guns, political connections, Garrett pointed out. What do we have? Each other, and the law, if we use it right. Hale operates in gray areas, uses intimidation and dirty tricks because he can't do it legally. We document everything, build a case, take it to the territorial authorities if we have to. Authorities are in his pocket, Sarah said flatly. Some are. Not all. And even the ones he owns will hesitate before blatantly ignoring a collective complaint from 7 ranches. It's one thing to help Hale quietly. It's another to publicly side with him against a united opposition. Morrison cleared his throat. What about the debt thing? That Cross fellow coming after your wife? That's still happening? Eliza spoke up before Dane could answer. Yes, he's filing with the judge tomorrow unless we pay. But that's my problem, not yours. Wrong, Morrison said bluntly. It's a problem for all of us. Hale set that up, which means he'll use the same tactic on anyone else who resists. We need to address it. How? Eliza asked. The debt's real. I can't make it disappear. No, but we can make sure you're not alone in fighting it. Morrison looked around the group. I propose we hire a lawyer, real one, not some frontier fraud. Someone who can challenge the debt's validity, the jurisdiction, make Cross's life difficult, by time, at least. That costs money, Walsh said. So we pool it. Split the cost 7 ways, it's manageable. And it sends a message that we protect our own. One by one, the others nodded agreement. Eliza felt something tight in her chest loosen, something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was. Trust, community, the knowledge that she wasn't facing this alone. All right, Dane said, we're agreed. We form the alliance, hire a lawyer, stand together, but we need a name, something that makes it clear we're serious. The Water Rights Coalition, Sarah suggested. Too formal, Garrett said. The Territorial Alliance? They debated for another hour, finally settling on a simple name that spoke to their purpose. The Independent Ranchers Alliance. Not flashy, but clear. They drew up terms. How they'd communicate, coordinate, support each other. Morrison knew a lawyer in the territorial capital, a man with a reputation for honesty and competence. They pooled money to hire him with instructions to challenge Marcus Cross's claim on every possible legal ground. When the meeting finally broke up near midnight, Eliza felt exhausted, but also something else. Something like power. The knowledge that she'd helped build this, that her story and her struggles had been the catalyst that brought these people together. Dane must have seen it in her face because on the ride home he said, "You did good tonight." "I barely said anything." "You didn't have to. They saw what Hale was doing to you and recognized it could happen to them. Your willingness to fight made them willing to fight. That matters." "I'm still terrified." "So am I. But we're terrified together now. That's different." They reached the ranch as dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The house looked small and vulnerable in the vast landscape, and Eliza thought about how fragile everything they'd built really was. How easily it could all be destroyed, but it could also be defended by people willing to stand together, willing to risk comfort for principle, willing to fight instead of flee. Marcus Cross filed his claim the next day, as promised, but he filed it to find 7 ranchers had already filed a collective complaint questioning his jurisdiction, the debt's validity, and his legal standing to pursue claims in the territory. The lawyer Morrison hired was already drafting motions, requesting delays, challenging every procedural step. It wasn't victory, but it was resistance. And resistance was something. Hale's response came 2 days later. A letter delivered to each ranch in the alliance, polite and cold, expressing his disappointment in their poor judgment and suggesting they reconsider before making decisions they'd regret. "He's trying to scare us," Morrison said when they met to discuss the letters. "Wants us to fold before this gets serious." "Do we fold?" one of the Lopez brothers asked, voice wavering slightly. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We knew this was coming. We stand firm." "What if he escalates?" "Then we escalate too. We're not helpless." But Eliza wondered if that was true. Hale had resources they couldn't match, experience in this kind of warfare they didn't possess. What did they have except stubbornness and desperation? The answer came a week later when she was riding the property line, checking fences. She noticed something strange. Survey markers where none had been before. New ones, professional, driven deep into the frozen ground. She brought Dane out to see them, and his face went white. "These are on our land," he said, examining the markers. "At least 50 yards inside our property line." "What does that mean?" "It means someone's claiming we're wrong about our boundaries, that our land extends less far than we thought." He pulled out their land deed, comparing it to the markers. "This is fraud. Someone's trying to redraw the lines." Hale. "Has to be. He must have hired a surveyor to create false markers, probably planning to file a claim saying we've been trespassing on his land. If it goes through, we lose our best pastures, maybe our water access." It was brilliant and vicious. Even if they fought it, the legal battle would drain resources and time they couldn't afford. And if they lost, the ranch became unviable. Eliza stared at the markers, feeling rage build inside her. Not the hot, impulsive anger she'd felt before, but something colder and more focused. She was tired of being pushed, threatened, manipulated. Tired of men like Hale treating people like pieces on a game board. "We need to go public with this," she said. "What?" "Hale's power comes from operating in shadows, doing things quietly so people don't see the pattern. What if we expose it? Make it public, show everyone exactly what he's doing." "How?" "Town meeting. We call one. Invite everyone. Lay out the evidence. The fence cutting, the supply disruptions, now this survey fraud. Build a case that everyone can see. Hale will deny everything. Let him, but people aren't stupid. They've seen him do this before. If we shine a light on it, make it impossible to ignore, maybe enough people get angry to matter." Dane considered this, then slowly nodded. "It's risky. Puts us in the spotlight, makes us targets." "We're already targets. Might as well make it count." They called the meeting for the following Saturday, posting notices around town and spreading word through the alliance. Hale would know about it, would certainly attend, but that was fine. Eliza wanted him there, wanted him to see that they weren't backing down. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. Eliza practiced what she'd say, how she'd present the evidence, trying to find words that would cut through fear and apathy to reach something deeper, Dane watched her prepare with quiet approval. "You've changed," he said one evening. "How?" "When you got here, you couldn't look people in the eye. Now you're preparing to face down the most powerful man in the territory in front of the whole town. That's not a small change." "I'm terrified." "I know, but you're doing it anyway. That's courage." Eliza wasn't sure it was courage. Felt more like fury and desperation combined into something that looked like bravery from the outside. But maybe that's all courage ever was. Being terrified and doing the thing anyway because the alternative was worse. Saturday came cold and bright, and the town hall filled to capacity. Seems everyone wanted to see the showdown between the small ranchers and Victor Hale. The man himself sat in the front row, flanked by his foreman and what looked like a lawyer, his expression pleasantly neutral. Morrison called the meeting to order and gave a brief introduction. Then Dane stood and began laying out their case. The pattern of harassment, the cut fences, the suspicious supply disruptions. He was clear, methodical, damning. Hale listened with a slight smile, occasionally whispering to his lawyer. Then it was Eliza's turn. She stood, smoothed her simple dress, and faced the crowd. Saw familiar faces from the general store, the saloon, ranches she'd visited. Saw fear and curiosity, and in a few faces, something like hope. "My name is Eliza Keller," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the packed room. 2 months ago, I arrived in this territory with nothing, running from men who thought they owned me, who thought desperation gave them rights to my life, my labor, my future. I was running because I believed that's all people like me could do when faced with people like them. Run and hope. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the crowd. But I don't believe that anymore. Because I've learned something out here on the frontier. I've learned that power isn't permanent. That bullies only win when good people stay silent. And I've learned that sometimes the only way to stop running is to turn around and fight. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hale's smile had faded slightly. "Victor Hale wants our land," Eliza continued, "not because he needs it. He's got more land than any man could use. He wants it because he can take it. Because he's always been able to take what he wants, and nobody's ever made him stop." "I object to this characterization," Hale's lawyer said, standing. "Mr. Hale is a respected businessman." "Sit down," Morrison growled. "She gets to speak." The lawyer sat, and Eliza pressed on. 2 weeks ago, someone planted false survey markers on our land. Professional work, meant to look official. We have evidence it's fraud, but fighting it legally would cost time and money we don't have. That's the point. Bleed us dry through 1,000 small cuts until we're desperate enough to sell. And if that doesn't work, well... She gestured to where Marcus Cross sat near the back. "There's always manufactured debt, convenient legal claims, pressure from every angle until we break." "These are serious accusations," Hale said, standing now. "I hope you have evidence to support them." "I have a pattern. Years of ranchers selling to you under suspicious circumstances. Fences cut, wells poisoned, supplies mysteriously unavailable. Always just bad luck, always just coincidence. Until it happens to everyone who refuses to sell." Eliza's voice strengthened. "How many of you in this room have experienced bad luck right after turning down one of Mr. Hale's generous offers?" Silence. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. 1, then 3, then a dozen. People Eliza had never met, acknowledging a truth they'd been too scared to voice. Hale's expression finally cracked, showing anger underneath the polish. "You're making wild accusations based on paranoia," he said. "I've built my operation through hard work and fair dealing. If people choose to sell to me, that's their choice." "Is it?" Eliza challenged. "Or is it a choice between selling and being destroyed? Because that's not really a choice, Mr. Hale. That's extortion." "Careful, Mrs. Keller. Words like that have legal consequences." "So do actions like yours. And I'm done being careful. I'm done being afraid of men who use power to take what they want. I ran for 3 weeks across this territory trying to escape men like that. I'm not running anymore." The room erupted in noise. Arguments, accusations, people shouting to be heard. Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Through it all, Hale stared at Eliza with naked hatred, and she stared back, refusing to look away. This was war now. "Open," declared, "no more shadows or pretense." And Eliza discovered something shocking. She wasn't afraid anymore. The explosion came at 3 in the morning, shattering the night, and jolting Eliza from sleep. She was on her feet before her mind fully registered what had happened, stumbling into the main room where Dane was already at the window, rifle in hand. "The barn," he said, his voice tight. "Something's on fire." Orange light flickered against the darkness, and Eliza could hear the terrified screaming of horses trapped inside. She grabbed her coat and ran after Dane into the freezing night, her bare feet barely registering the shock of cold ground. The barn's south wall was engulfed in flames, fire climbing the dry wood with hungry speed. Smoke poured from the open doors where Dane had already disappeared inside, and Eliza could hear him shouting, trying to calm the panicked animals. She plunged into the smoke-filled interior, eyes burning, lungs screaming. Ranger was already loose, Dane leading him out with one hand while trying to reach Storm's stall. The gray mare was rearing and kicking, eyes rolling white with terror. "Get Duchess!" Dane shouted over the roar of flames. "I'll get Storm!" Eliza fought her way through the smoke to Duchess's stall. The mare was surprisingly calm, though her sides heaved with fear. Eliza fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking, finally got it open and grabbed Duchess's halter. "Come on, girl, come on!" The mare followed her toward the door, trusting even in her fear. Behind them, Eliza could hear Dane still struggling with Storm, the horse's panic making her dangerous. She got Duchess outside and tied her to the fence post, then turned back. The fire had spread to the hayloft now, and burning debris was starting to fall. Through the smoke, Eliza could see Dane finally getting a rope on Storm, but the mare was fighting him, backing deeper into the stall instead of toward the exit. Eliza grabbed a bucket of water from the trough and soaked a blanket, wrapping it around herself before running back inside. The heat was intense now, the smoke so thick she could barely see. She found Dane by following his voice, still talking to Storm in that calm, steady tone even as flames licked at the walls around them. "She won't come," he said when Eliza reached him. "She's too scared. I can't force her without getting us both killed." "Then we go together." Eliza moved to Storm's other side, speaking softly to the mare. "Easy, girl. We're going to walk out of here. Nice and slow, that's it." Between the two of them, with Dane pulling and Eliza pushing, they got Storm moving, step by terrifying step through the smoke and heat, dodging falling embers until finally they burst out into the cold night air. Storm bolted the moment she was free, galloping away from the burning barn. But she was alive, and so were they. Dane grabbed Eliza's shoulders, checking her for injuries. "You shouldn't have come back in. Could have been killed." "So could you. We're partners, remember? We do stupid things together." He almost smiled, then turned to survey the damage. The barn was lost. Flames had consumed most of the structure, and all they could do was wet down the surrounding area to keep the fire from spreading to other buildings. By the time the sun rose, the barn was a smoldering ruin. The horses had scattered but were unhurt. The cattle had stayed clear of the fire, spooked but safe. But all their hay, their tack, their tools, everything stored in the barn, was gone. "Deliberate," Dane said, examining the south wall where the fire had started. "See these burn patterns? Started in multiple places at once. Someone set this." "Hail." "Can't prove it, but yes, probably." He stood, his face grim with soot and exhaustion. This is his answer to the town meeting, a message that we crossed a line. By telling the truth? By making him look weak. Men like Hale can't afford to look weak, so they escalate. Dane looked at the ruins. "We're going to need help rebuilding. Lumber, labor, time we don't have. The Alliance is already stretched thin. They're facing their own problems. Hale's hitting all of us now, not just us. Garrett lost 50 head of cattle to rustlers last week. Sarah's well got poisoned. The Lopez brothers had their credit cut off at the general store." He ran a hand through his hair. "We poked a bear, and now the bear's fighting back. But the Alliance didn't abandon them." That afternoon, wagons started arriving. Morrison with lumber salvaged from an old shed, the Lopez brothers with tools, Sarah with food and medical supplies. Even ranchers who hadn't joined the Alliance sent what they could spare, perhaps seeing in the burned barn a warning of what could happen to them. They worked for 3 days straight, building a new barn that was smaller than the old one, but functional. Eliza worked alongside the men, hauling lumber, driving nails, learning construction on the fly. Her hands blistered and bled, her back screamed with every movement, but she kept going because stopping meant giving in. On the third night, Bone-tired and filthy, she sat with Sarah Chen by the fire while the men finished securing the roof. "You could leave," Sarah said quietly. "Dane would understand. This isn't your fight, you just got caught in it." "It became my fight when I stood up at that meeting. When I said I wouldn't run anymore." "Noble. But nobility doesn't stop bullets or fires." "Neither does running. I tried that. Didn't work." Eliza stared into the flames. "At least here I'm fighting for something instead of just running from it." "What are you fighting for?" "A life that's mine. Not my dead husband's, not the men who chased me, not Victor Hale's. Mine, built with my own hands, my own choices. That's worth fighting for." Sarah nodded slowly. "I said almost the same thing when my husband died, and everyone told me to sell the ranch, move to town, live a proper widow's life. Been fighting ever since. Some days I wonder if they were right, if fighting's just prolonging the inevitable." "Do you really believe that?" "No, but I wonder." Sarah stood, brushing off her skirt. The lawyer Morrison hired got Marcus Cross's claim delayed again. Challenged jurisdiction, demanded documentation. He can't provide without admitting the whole thing's fraudulent. It's not victory, but it's time. How much time? Month? Maybe 2. Eventually they'll force a hearing, and then we'll need real evidence or a miracle. "What about the survey markers? Can we prove they're fraudulent?" "Working on it. Need to find the original surveyor who did Dane's land, get him to testify. But he's disappeared, probably paid off or scared off. Without him, it's our word against Hale's forged documents. Every problem had another problem nested inside it, like Russian dolls of complications." Eliza felt the weight of it pressing down, the sheer impossibility of winning against someone with Hale's resources and ruthlessness. But the barn got finished. The horses came back. Life continued because it had to, because stopping meant dying. 2 weeks later, Marcus Cross showed up at the ranch unannounced, riding up bold as brass in the middle of the day. Eliza saw him coming and called for Dane, who emerged from the new barn with his rifle. "That's close enough," Dane said when Marcus was still 20 yards out. Marcus stopped, hands visible and empty. "Just want to talk. Have a proposal." "Not interested in proposals from you or your employer." "Employer? I work for myself." "Sure you do. And Hale's money in your pocket is just coincidence." Marcus's smile was sour. "Smart man. All right, I'll be straight. This whole thing's gotten out of hand. Lawyers, alliances, public accusations, nobody's making money except the lawyers. So here's my proposal. I drop the debt claim. You convince the alliance to back off Hale. Everyone goes home." "Why would Hale agree to that?" Eliza asked, stepping out to stand beside Dane. "Because this is costing him too. Bad publicity, legal fees, time he'd rather spend on legitimate business. He's a businessman, not a warlord. When a fight stops being profitable, smart businessmen find another way." "He burned our barn," Dane said flatly. "Did he? Can you prove that? Because if you can't, you're just making more accusations you can't back up. That's defamation, and that's got legal consequences." Marcus shifted in his saddle. "Look, I don't care about your alliance or your crusade. I just want what I'm owed. But if that debt gets erased as part of a larger settlement, I can live with it. Can you?" Eliza studied him, looking for the trap. Because there was always a trap with men like this. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You disband the alliance, drop all legal actions against Hale, sign a non-disparagement agreement. In return, the debt disappears. The survey dispute gets resolved in your favor, and Hale leaves you alone. You get to keep your ranch, live your lives. Everyone wins. Except all the other ranchers Hale will go after once we're not unified." "Not your problem. You wanted to survive. This is survival. Take it." The temptation was visceral. To be done with this fight, to go back to the simple struggle of running a ranch instead of waging war. Eliza could feel it pulling at her, the seductive promise of peace. "No," Dane said. Marcus blinked. "No? We're turning down your deal. The alliance stays, the legal actions continue, and you can tell Hale that we're not backing down." "You're making a mistake. Hale's got resources you can't match, connections you can't fight. This is your chance to walk away intact." "Then we won't walk away intact. We'll crawl away if we have to, but we won't abandon everyone who stood with us just to save ourselves. That's not who we are. Marcus's expression hardened. Your funeral. Don't say I didn't offer you a way out. He rode off, and Eliza turned to Dane. That was our chance, our way out of this. I know. And we could have ended this. Been safe. Safe until the next time Hale wanted something and there was no alliance to stop him. Safe until he decided our cooperation earned us more land to acquire. We'd just be delaying the inevitable and betraying everyone who trusted us in the process. So instead we fight and probably lose everything. Probably. Dane met her eyes. You want to take the deal? I'll understand. This is more than you signed up for. Did she? Eliza turned the question over in her mind, examining it from all angles. 3 months ago, she would have jumped at the chance to escape, to trade principles for safety. But 3 months of building something with her own hands, of standing up when it was easier to bow down, of learning that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, that had changed her. I signed up for partnership, she said finally, for building something that's ours. Can't do that if we abandon it the first time it gets hard. This is way past hard. This is potentially catastrophic. Then we'll be catastrophically stubborn together, but we're not taking that deal. Relief flashed across Dane's face, so quick she almost missed it. All right then, we keep fighting. The alliance met that night in Morrison's barn again, and when Dane relayed Marcus's offer, the reaction was mixed. Some wanted to take it, wanted the safety of retreat. Others were angry that Hale thought he could buy them off so easily. The argument went on for hours, voices raised, tempers flaring. Finally, Sarah Chen stood up. I've got a question for everyone who wants to take the deal. What happens in 5 years when Hale comes after your land and there's no alliance to protect you? What happens when it's your barn burning, your cattle stolen, your family threatened? You think he'll offer you a deal then, or will he just take what he wants? We don't know he'll do that, Walsh said. Yes, we do. That's his pattern. That's always been his pattern. We're only protected now because we're together. Split us up and we're all vulnerable. So what's the alternative? One of the Lopez brothers asked. Fight until we're all ruined? The alternative, Eliza said, surprising herself by speaking, is we stop playing defense and start playing offense. Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Morrison asked. We've been reacting to everything Hale does, fighting his claims, defending against his attacks, responding to his moves. That's not working because he controls the pace. He can afford to drag this out, weight us down. We can't. Eliza moved to the map spread across the table. So we change tactics. We find something he wants, and we threaten it. What does he want that we could threaten? Reputation, political ambitions. He's been positioning himself to run for territorial legislature, right? Building connections, making donations, playing the respected businessman. What happens if we expose what he really is? Not just locally, but to everyone who matters. We already tried that at the town meeting, Garrett said. People saw, but nothing changed, because we didn't have proof. We had accusations, patterns, but no hard evidence. What if we get evidence? How? Same way Hale gets his. We find people he's hurt, get them to testify. We document everything he does from now on. We build a case so airtight that even his political friends can't ignore it. Eliza's mind was racing now, seeing the strategy unfold. And we don't just present it locally. We go to the territorial newspapers, the ones he doesn't control. We make it a scandal big enough that he can't bury it. That's ambitious, Morrison said slowly. Maybe too ambitious. Getting people to testify against Hale is hard when they're scared of retribution. Then we find the ones who aren't scared anymore. The ones he's already destroyed, who've got nothing left to lose. There have to be dozens of them across the territory. And coordinating all that, documenting everything, building a legal case while we're also trying to run our ranches and defend against his attacks. You know how much work that is? I do. That's why we divide it up. Each of us takes a piece. Sarah, you're best with legal documents. You coordinate the documentation. Garrett, you know people all over the territory. You track down witnesses. Morrison, you've got the connections with legitimate newspapers. The rest of us keep our ranches running and watch each other's backs. It was crazy, overly optimistic, probably doomed to fail, but it was something, and something was better than just waiting to be destroyed. It could work, Sarah said thoughtfully. If we're careful, if we're thorough, it could actually work. Or it could make everything worse, Walsh countered. Hale already burned one barn. What do you think he'll do if we really threaten him? What's he going to do? Burn all our barns? Kill all our cattle? That's not intimidation anymore. That's open warfare. And even Hale can't afford that level of visibility. Eliza's voice was firm. Right now he thinks we're scared, thinks we'll crumble if he pushes hard enough. We prove him wrong. And maybe, just maybe, he backs down. And if he doesn't, then at least we'll go down fighting instead of just giving up. The vote was close, but it passed. They would go on the offensive, build their case, force Hale to fight on their terms instead of his. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Over the next month, they executed the plan with grim determination. Sarah compiled every incident, every suspicious land sale, every complaint ever filed against Hale into a massive document. Garrett rode across the territory, finding people who'd been forced out by Hale's tactics, convincing them to put their stories on a record. Morrison reached out to newspapers in the territorial capital, feeling out which editors might be interested in a story about frontier corruption. And every day, Eliza and Dane worked the ranch, maintaining the appearance of normal life while supporting the larger effort. It was exhausting, running on too little sleep and too much coffee, always looking over their shoulders for the next attack. It came in the form of a legal notice delivered by a territorial marshal. Hale was suing the alliance for defamation, demanding damages and a public retraction. The amount he claimed, $15,000, divided among the alliance members. He's trying to bankrupt us through legal fees, the alliance's lawyer explained when they gathered to discuss the lawsuit. Even if he doesn't win, the cost of defending this case could break all of you. That's the point. Can we win? Morrison asked. If we can prove what you're saying is true, yes. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. But that means going to trial, presenting evidence, getting witnesses to testify under oath. Are you prepared for that? They looked at each other, seeing the same calculation on every face. The cost in money, time, stress. The risk that they'd lose everything even if they won. We're prepared, Eliza said, and she saw Dane's slight smile, the approval in his eyes. The lawyer nodded. Then I'll file our response, but I need you to understand, this is going to get ugly. Hale's lawyers will dig into all of your lives, looking for anything they can use against you. They'll attack your credibility, your reputations, your marriages. Nothing will be off limits. Let them try, Sarah said grimly. We've got nothing to hide that's worse than what he's done. But Eliza felt a chill run through her. Nothing to hide? She had plenty to hide. Her whole past was a liability waiting to be exploited. Marcus Cross knew it, which meant Hale knew it, and they'd use it the moment it became useful. As if summoning him by thought, Marcus appeared at the ranch again 3 days later. This time he brought documents, thick packets of legal papers that he handed to Eliza with a pitying expression. Court records from Philadelphia, he said. All the debts Thomas accumulated, the people he defrauded, the charges that were pending when he died. Makes interesting reading. Eliza's hand shook as she took the papers. These are sealed records. How did you get... Money opens a lot of doors, so does having the right connections. Marcus smiled. Now here's the thing. These become public the moment Hale's defamation case goes to trial. His lawyers will introduce them as evidence of your questionable character. They'll paint you as a criminal fleeing justice, a liar who married Dane under false pretenses. By the time they're done, you'll be lucky if anyone in the territory will speak to you. I didn't commit any crimes. Thomas's debts weren't mine. Maybe. But it won't matter. The accusation is enough. People will believe what they want to believe, and Hale's lawyers are very good at making people believe the right things. He paused. Unless what? Unless you convince your husband and the alliance to drop the whole thing, settle the lawsuit, disband, go back to your lives. Do that, and these records stay sealed. Nobody needs to know about your complicated past. It was blackmail, pure and simple. Eliza wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Marcus to go to hell and take his records with him. But she thought about Dane, about everything he'd built, about how her past could destroy his reputation along with hers. I need to think about it, she said. You've got 24 hours. After that, these go to Hale's lawyers, whether you cooperate or not. He rode off, leaving Eliza standing in the yard with the damning papers in her hands. She stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the walls closing in. When Dane came in from the fields that evening, she told him everything, showed him the papers, explained the threat, waited for his reaction. He read through the documents carefully, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set them aside and looked at her. How much of this is true? The debts, the charges, that's all real. But I wasn't part of Thomas's schemes. I didn't even know about most of them until after he died. I believe you. You do? You told me the truth from the beginning. About running, about why, about everything. You've never lied to me. Why would I doubt you now? Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. But if this comes out, it'll destroy your reputation. People will say you married a criminal, that you can't be trusted. Let them say it. I know who you are. That's what matters. But the Alliance will stand by us or they won't. If they're going to bail at the first real test, better to know now. He stood, moving to the window. You want to take Marcus's offer? Save everyone the embarrassment? Do you want me to? No, but I want you to make your own choice. This is your past, your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. Eliza thought about it. Really thought about it, examining all the angles. If she cooperated, her past stayed hidden, but the Alliance fell apart and Hale won. If she refused, she'd be publicly humiliated, but the fight would continue. 3 months ago, the choice would have been easy. Pride meant nothing compared to survival. But 3 months of learning that she was stronger than her worst moments, capable of more than she'd ever imagined, had changed the equation. I'm not taking the deal, she said. Let them make it public. I'm done being ashamed of surviving. Dane turned from the window, and the look he gave her was fierce with pride. Then we tell the Alliance tonight. Give them fair warning about what's coming. If they want to back out, that's their right. But we're seeing this through. The Alliance met in emergency session, and Eliza laid it all out. Her husband's crimes, the debts, the charges, everything Hale's lawyers would use against her. When she finished, there was silence. Then Morrison cleared his throat. My wife ran off with a whiskey drummer when I was 30, left me with 2 kids and a mountain of debt from her shopping habits. Took me 10 years to pay it off and another 5 to trust anyone again. You think I give a damn about your husband's mistakes? My father was a thief, Sarah said quietly. Stole from everyone he knew, died in prison when I was 12. I've spent my whole life proving I'm not him. Your past doesn't scare me. One by one, the others spoke up. Not to excuse or diminish what Eliza had revealed, but to acknowledge that everyone had histories they weren't proud of, pasts that complicated their presence. The frontier was full of people running from something, trying to become someone new. Here's what matters, Garrett said finally. Are you with us now? Are you fighting for this alliance and what it represents? Yes, Eliza said without hesitation. Then your past doesn't matter. What matters is who you choose to be today. The vote was unanimous. The alliance would continue, would fight the lawsuit, would expose Hale's corruption regardless of what it cost them personally. They were done running, done hiding, done letting fear dictate their choices. When Eliza and Dane rode home that night, she felt lighter than she had in months. The truth was out, and instead of destroying her, it had freed her. Whatever came next, at least she wouldn't be carrying that secret anymore. Thank you, she said to Dane as they put the horses away. For what? For believing me, for standing with me, for... She gestured helplessly. All of it. You're my wife, my partner. That's not conditional on your past being perfect. It's based on who you are now, who you're choosing to be. He paused. And who you're choosing to be is pretty damn brave. I'm terrified. Brave people usually are. That's what makes it brave. They walked back to the house together through the dark, and Eliza realized something that should have been obvious, but felt like revelation anyway. She wasn't alone in this fight. Not anymore. She had Dane, had the Alliance, had a community that had chosen to stand with her despite knowing the worst about her past. For someone who'd spent years feeling utterly isolated, utterly without support, that was worth more than safety, more than comfort, more than anything Hale could threaten her with. The trial was set for early April. They had 6 weeks to prepare their case, gather their evidence, steel themselves for the battle ahead. 6 weeks to prove that the frontier wasn't just about who had the most money or the biggest ranch or the most ruthless tactics. 6 weeks to prove that sometimes ordinary people standing together could beat extraordinary power. It wasn't enough time, but it would have to be, because they were done running, done hiding, done letting men like Victor Hale decide what they deserved to have. They were going to fight, and win or lose, they'd do it together. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source 3 weeks before the trial. A young surveyor named Daniel Wright appeared at the ranch one evening, hat in hand, looking nervous enough to bolt at any sudden movement. "I need to talk to you about the boundary markers," he said without preamble. "The ones on your eastern property line." Dane invited him in, and over coffee that Eliza had finally learned to make without burning, Wright told his story. He'd been hired by a company out of Cheyenne to survey land in the territory. Standard work, good pay, nothing suspicious. Until his supervisor told him to adjust certain coordinates on the Keller Ranch survey, moving the boundary markers 50 yards west. "I refused," Wright said, his hands shaking slightly around the coffee cup. "Told him I wouldn't falsify official documents. He said it was just a minor correction, that the original survey had been wrong. But I'd seen the original survey. It was accurate. What he was asking me to do was fraud." "So what happened?" Eliza asked. "He fired me. Blacklisted me with every surveying company in the territory. I haven't been able to find work in 2 months. Wright looked up, meeting Dane's eyes. "I can't prove who hired the company to do the false survey, but the timing matches exactly with when you started having problems with Mr. Hale. And the supervisor who fired me, he's worked on 3 other Hale acquisitions in the past 2 years. "Will you testify to this?" Dane asked. "In court? Under oath?" "That's why I'm here. I've got nothing left to lose, and what they did was wrong. I'll testify." It was the first crack in Hale's armor, and it changed everything. With Wright's testimony, they could prove the survey fraud, and if they could prove one fraud, it opened the door to questioning everything else. The Alliance's lawyer was cautiously optimistic when they presented Wright's statement. "This is good, really good, but we need more. One whistleblower establishes fraud, but it doesn't prove a pattern. We need to show this is how Hale operates, not just an isolated incident." They redoubled their efforts, and slowly, carefully, more pieces fell into place. A former employee of Hale's who'd been fired for refusing to cut a competitor's fences came forward. A widow whose land Hale had acquired after her wells mysteriously went dry admitted that she'd seen Hale's men near her property the night before the contamination. A banker who'd been pressured to deny credit to ranchers Hale wanted to acquire agreed to testify about the intimidation he'd faced. Each person who came forward made it easier for the next one. Fear was contagious, but so was courage, and watching others stand up gave people the strength to stand up themselves. Marcus Cross made one more attempt to stop them, showing up at the ranch with an offer of $5,000 if Eliza would testify against the Alliance, claimed they'd coerced her into making false statements about Hale. "You could walk away from all this," Marcus said. "Clean slate, fresh start, more money than you've ever seen. All you have to do is tell the truth, that the Alliance manipulated you, used your desperation to advance their agenda." Eliza looked at him for a long moment, then said, "No." "No? Just no? You're not even going to consider—" "I said no! Now get off our property before I get the rifle." Marcus's face went red. "You're making a mistake. When this all falls apart, when your husband loses everything because you were too stubborn to see sense, remember that I offered you a way out." "I'll remember," Eliza said calmly. "I'll remember that you tried to buy my integrity and failed. Now leave." He left, and Dane emerged from where he'd been watching through the window. "You handled that well. Getting easier each time. Turns out saying no to men who think they can buy me is almost enjoyable." "Almost?" "Very enjoyable, actually." They both laughed, the kind of giddy relief that comes from surviving something that should have broken you. And in that moment, Eliza realized something profound. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, building, choosing her life instead of having it chosen for her. The trial began on a cold April morning with the territorial courthouse packed beyond capacity. People stood in the aisles, crowded the windows, spilled out into the street. This wasn't just about land disputes or defamation anymore. It had become a referendum on how the frontier would be shaped, by power and intimidation, or by law and community. Hale arrived with 3 lawyers, all expensive suits, and practiced arrogance. The Alliance had their single lawyer, Morrison's friend Thomas Brennan, a wiry man in his 50s who looked outmatched, but possessed a sharp intelligence that showed in his eyes. The judge was a stern woman named Margaret Thorne, who'd been appointed to the territorial bench after a distinguished career in criminal law back east. She had a reputation for fairness and an intolerance for nonsense that made both sides wary. Hale's lead attorney, a polished man named Whitmore, opened with a blistering attack. The alliance had engaged in a coordinated campaign of defamation, he argued, making wild accusations without evidence, damaging his client's reputation and business interests. He painted Hale as a victim of jealous competitors who couldn't match his success and so resorted to slander. Mr. Hale came to this territory with nothing, Whitmore said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. Through hard work, fair dealing, and sound business practices, he built an empire. And now these small-time ranchers, unable to compete, seek to tear him down with lies and innuendo. This trial will expose their conspiracy for what it is, a desperate attempt to destroy a better man. It was effective. Eliza could see some of the spectators nodding, swayed by Whitmore's rhetoric. Hale sat at his table looking dignified and wounded, playing the part of persecuted businessman perfectly. Then Brennan stood for the defense's opening statement. He was less polished than Whitmore, his suit slightly rumpled, his delivery straightforward rather than theatrical. But his words carried weight. "This case is simple," Brennan said. "The defense claims Mr. Hale engaged in fraud, intimidation, and illegal tactics to acquire land. Mr. Hale says these claims are false, so we'll prove they're true. We'll present evidence, witnesses, documentation showing a pattern of corruption spanning years. By the time we're done, you'll see Victor Hale not as a victim, but as a predator who's finally being held accountable." The first witness was Daniel Wright, the surveyor. He testified clearly and credibly about being asked to falsify the boundary markers, about being fired and blacklisted when he refused. Under cross-examination, Whitmore tried to paint him as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but Wright's documentation was too thorough, his testimony too consistent. Next came the widow, then the banker, then the former employee. Each one added another piece to the puzzle, and slowly, methodically, Brennan built his case. Hale's lawyers fought every point, objected to everything, tried to discredit each witness. But the pattern was too clear, the evidence too overwhelming. On the third day, Whitmore played his trump card. He called Eliza to the stand. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for it, but walking to that witness chair felt like walking to an execution. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, and she could feel the weight of judgment, curiosity, anticipation. Whitmore started gentle, establishing her background, her marriage to Dane. Then he moved in for the kill. "Mrs. Keller, isn't it true that when you arrived in this territory, you were fleeing criminal charges in Philadelphia?" "No, I was fleeing debt collectors, not criminal charges." "But there were charges filed against you, were there not? For theft and fraud?" "False charges, filed by men trying to force me into working for them." "False charges, I see." Whitmore produced documents, the same ones Marcus had threatened her with. "These court records tell a different story. They show your husband, Thomas Cross, engaged in extensive fraud. They show you benefited from those fraudulent activities. They show—" "Objection," Brennan said, standing. "Mrs. Keller is not on trial here. Her husband's activities are irrelevant to this case." "They go to credibility, Your Honor. If the witness has a history of dishonesty—" "My husband was dishonest," Eliza cut in, her voice sharp. "I wasn't. I didn't know about his schemes until after he died, and when I found out, I refused to be part of covering them up. That's why the charges were filed, because I wouldn't cooperate with the men who enabled his crimes." Judge Thorne leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, unless you can establish that Mrs. Keller herself committed fraud, her late husband's activities are indeed irrelevant. Move on." Whitmore changed tactics. "Mrs. Keller, you married Dane Keller very quickly after arriving here, did you not? Within hours, in fact." "Yes." "That's quite sudden. Almost as if you were desperate for protection, for a way to legitimize your presence here." "I was desperate. Men were hunting me, and I needed safety. Dane offered it. I accepted." "So this marriage was a business arrangement? A transaction?" "It started that way. It became something more." "Something more. How convenient." Whitmore's smile was cutting. "Isn't it true that you manipulated Mr. Keller's sympathy to secure your position here? That you've been using him to advance your own agenda against Mr. Hale?" "No, that's not—" "Isn't it true that this entire alliance was your idea? That you pushed these ranchers into a fight they didn't want, using your own grievances as justification?" Eliza felt anger rising, hot and sharp. The alliance was our collective idea, formed because Victor Hale was systematically destroying anyone who wouldn't sell to him. I didn't manipulate anyone. I told my story, and others recognized their own experiences in it. Your story. Let's talk about your story. Whitmore paced, building drama. You claim you were fleeing persecution, but isn't it more accurate to say you were fleeing consequences? Your husband left debts, and rather than honor them, you ran. You stole a horse. I left payment. Insufficient payment. You crossed state lines to avoid legal obligations. You lied about your identity. And now you want this court to believe you're a credible witness against a respected businessman? Whitmore shook his head. Mrs. Keller, I suggest you're exactly what you appear to be. An opportunist who saw a chance to attach yourself to someone with property and took it, regardless of who you had to destroy in the process. The courtroom was silent. Eliza felt every eye on her, felt the weight of Whitmore's accusations settling like stones. This was it. The moment where her past either destroyed everything or became irrelevant in the face of present truth. She took a breath and met Whitmore's eyes directly. You're right, she said quietly. I ran. I was desperate and scared, and I made choices I'm not proud of. I married a man I barely knew because I had no other option. I came to this territory with nothing but fear and survival instinct. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the courtroom. But that doesn't make Victor Hale innocent. My past doesn't erase his crimes, and my desperation doesn't invalidate the testimony of everyone else who's come forward. You want to paint me as untrustworthy? Fine. But Daniel Wright isn't untrustworthy. The banker isn't untrustworthy. The widow whose wells were poisoned isn't untrustworthy. You can attack me all you want, but you can't attack all of us. We'll see about that, Whitmore said coldly, and dismissed her. Eliza returned to her seat beside Dane, shaking but upright. He took her hand under the table, squeezed once. Well done, he whispered. The trial continued for 2 more days. Hale took the stand and performed brilliantly, denying everything, offering alternative explanations for each incident, playing the aggrieved businessman with perfect conviction. His lawyers presented witnesses who testified to his character, his generosity, his fair dealing. But then Brennan produced something unexpected. During discovery, they'd found financial records showing payments from Hale to the surveying company, to the men accused of cutting fences, to Marcus Cross. The paper trail was damning, showing coordination between all the supposedly independent actors. Can you explain these payments, Mr. Hale? Brennan asked. Business expenses. Consulting fees. Perfectly legitimate. Consulting fees to the men who cut the Keller's fence? What exactly were they consulting on? I don't recall the specifics. I conduct a lot of business. And this payment to Marcus Cross, made the same week he arrived in the territory to pursue debt claims against Mrs. Keller. That's also a consulting fee. Mr. Cross and I had business discussions. That payment was unrelated to his personal matters. Really? Because the amount matches exactly what he claimed Mrs. Keller owed. Quite a coincidence. Hale's composure cracked slightly. I won't be interrogated like a criminal in my own defamation case. These ranchers are the ones on trial here, not me. Actually, Judge Thorne interjected, in a defamation case where truth is the defense, your actions are very much on trial. Answer the question, Mr. Hale. But Hale couldn't answer without admitting coordination or perjuring himself. He hedged, evaded, and with each non-answer, looked less like a victim and more like what he was, a man caught in his own web. The trial concluded on a Friday afternoon. Judge Thorne said she'd render her verdict within a week after reviewing all testimony and evidence. The alliance filed out of the courthouse exhausted but cautiously hopeful. We did good, Morrison said. Whatever happens, we told the truth. That counts for something. Think we won? One of the Lopez brothers asked. Won't know until the judge rules, Brennan said. But we made our case. Hale's team threw everything at us and we're still standing. That's a kind of victory right there. They dispersed to their ranches to wait. The days dragged by with excruciating slowness, every moment filled with second-guessing and what-ifs. Eliza threw herself into ranch work, rebuilding fence sections that had weathered badly over winter, helping Dane prepare for spring planting. Physical labor helped quiet the anxious voices in her head. On the 6th day, a rider came with news. Judge Thorne had reached her verdict and would announce it the following morning. They rode to town in the pre-dawn darkness, arriving to find the courthouse already crowded. Judge Thorne took her seat precisely at 9 o'clock. The room fell silent as she surveyed the packed courtroom with stern authority. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented in the case of Victor Hale versus the Independent Ranchers Alliance, she began. This court finds for the defendants. A collective gasp ran through the room. Hale's lawyers were on their feet immediately, objecting, calling for reconsideration. Judge Thorne silenced them with a look. The defendants successfully demonstrated that their statements about Mr. Hale's business practices were substantially true. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Therefore, the case is dismissed with prejudice. Your Honor, Whitmore began, I'm not finished. Thorne's voice cut like a blade. Furthermore, based on evidence presented during this trial, this court has serious concerns about potential criminal conduct. I am referring the matter to the territorial prosecutor for investigation into fraud, intimidation, and possible racketeering. Mr. Hale, you are hereby ordered to appear before this court in 2 weeks to address these concerns. Chaos erupted. Hale was on his feet, his face purple with rage, shouting about judicial overreach and improper procedure. His lawyers tried to calm him while simultaneously protesting the ruling. The alliance members were embracing, some crying, others too stunned to react. Eliza just sat there, barely able to process what had happened. They'd won. Not just the case, but potentially everything. If the territorial prosecutor pursued criminal charges, Hale could lose more than reputation. He could lose his freedom. Judge Thorne banged her gavel repeatedly until order was restored. This court is adjourned. All parties will conduct themselves appropriately or face contempt charges. She swept out, leaving behind a courtroom in turmoil. Outside, the alliance gathered in a tight cluster, still processing the victory. Morrison had tears running down his weathered face. Sarah was laughing, a wild, disbelieving sound. The Lopez brothers were pounding each other's backs so hard it looked painful. We did it, Garrett said, shaking his head. We actually did it. Did more than that, Brennan corrected, his usually serious face split by a huge grin. We didn't just win a lawsuit. We potentially ended Hale's reign over this territory. The prosecutor's a good man, honest. If he investigates, he'll find more than enough to bring charges. Hale's finished. He could flee, Walsh pointed out, take his money and disappear before charges are filed. Maybe, but even if he does, that's still victory. His land empire crumbles without him here to maintain it. We get breathing room, time to rebuild without constant attacks. It wasn't complete victory, but it was real and substantial. They'd stood up to power and won. They'd proven that the frontier didn't have to be ruled by whoever was most ruthless, that community and law could triumph over intimidation and fraud. Over the following weeks, events unfolded quickly. The territorial prosecutor did investigate and did find evidence of extensive criminal activity. Hale was indicted on 17 counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Before the trial could begin, he did flee, disappeared one night with whatever portable wealth he could carry, leaving behind his land holdings and business interests to be liquidated by the territorial government. Marcus Cross disappeared too, having lost his leverage when Hale's support evaporated. The debt claim against Eliza was formally dismissed for lack of evidence and improper jurisdiction. The survey fraud was corrected, confirming the Keller Ranch's original boundaries. The Water Rights Coalition that had started as a defense mechanism became a permanent institution, managing resources fairly for all ranchers in the territory. And slowly, carefully, life returned to normal. Or rather, to a new normal, one where the alliance remained strong, where ranchers worked together instead of in isolation, where predatory practices were called out rather than accepted as inevitable. Spring came to the Wyoming frontier with its usual dramatic flair, snow melting into rushing creeks, grass turning the brown landscape green, wildflowers erupting in impossible profusion. Eliza stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching Dane work with a new colt in the corral, his movements patient and confident. 6 months ago, she'd arrived at this ranch desperate and terrified, seeing it as a last refuge before oblivion. Now it was home. Not just a place she lived, but something she'd built with her own hands, defended with her own courage, earned with her own sweat and tears. The ranch was thriving. They'd sold some cattle at good prices, bought new equipment, hired 2 ranch hands to help with the expanding operation. The alliance had proven so successful that other territories were studying their model, considering similar cooperative arrangements. And her marriage, that desperate bargain struck in mutual need, had become something neither of them had anticipated. They weren't romantic lovers in the traditional sense, still maintained separate rooms, still valued their independence, but they were partners in the truest meaning of the word. They trusted each other, supported each other, built something together that was greater than either could have achieved alone. Dane finished with the Colt and walked toward the house, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the spring chill. He'd filled out since winter, the constant labor building muscle and the improved circumstances easing the lines of stress from his face. "Colt's coming along nicely," he said, climbing the porch steps. "Should be ready to sell by fall." "Good. We'll need the money if we're going to expand the north pasture like we discussed." "About that." Dane settled into the chair beside her. "Morrison mentioned the Jackson place is going up for sale. 800 acres adjacent to our eastern boundary. Good land, reliable water. Can we afford it? If we pool resources with Sarah and the Lopez brothers, split it 4 ways, would give us all room to grow without overextending." It was so typical of how they operated now, thinking cooperatively, planning together, building something sustainable, rather than just grabbing what they could. The frontier was changing, becoming civilized in the best sense of the word. Law replacing chaos, community replacing isolation. "I think we should do it," Eliza said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, we've got momentum. Might as well use it." Dane nodded, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You happy here?" The question surprised her. "Yes? Why?" "Just wondering. You've got options now. The debt's gone, Hale's gone, you're not running from anything anymore. You could leave if you wanted. Start fresh somewhere else. Is that what you want?" "No, but I want you to stay because you want to, not because you're trapped." Eliza considered this. Did she want to stay? 6 months ago, the answer would have been complicated, full of qualifications and escape clauses. But now? "I want to stay," she said simply. "This is my home. You're my partner. The life we're building together is mine in a way nothing else has ever been. Why would I leave that?" Relief flashed across Dane's face. "Good, because I'd miss you if you left. Got used to having you around." "Just around, that's all?" He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his stern features. "Maybe more than around. Maybe essential. Hard to imagine this place without you now." It was the closest he'd come to saying he cared, and coming from Dane, it meant everything. They weren't demonstrative people, didn't need grand declarations or romantic gestures, but they had something solid, built on mutual respect and shared struggle, and the quiet knowledge that they'd face whatever came next together. A year passed, then another. The ranch prospered. The alliance grew stronger, adding new members and expanding their cooperative model to include equipment sharing, bulk purchasing, and mutual defense agreements. Other territories adopted similar systems, and gradually, the frontier became a little less brutal, a little more civilized. Eliza learned to ride like she'd been born in a saddle, to rope cattle, to deliver calves, to shoot straight when predators threatened the herd. She learned the rhythms of the seasons, the patterns of weather, the 1,000 small skills that made the difference between thriving and merely surviving. She also became a voice in the community. When disputes arose, people sought her counsel. When the alliance needed someone to negotiate with suppliers or represent their interests in town, they turned to her. She'd become what she'd never imagined being, a leader, respected for her judgment and trusted with responsibility. And somewhere in the second year, she realized the nightmares had stopped. She no longer woke in a cold sweat, convinced men were coming for her. No longer flinched at unexpected sounds or kept escape routes planned in her head. The fear that had defined her for so long had faded, replaced by confidence earned through countless small victories. Dane changed too. He smiled more, talked more, let down the walls he'd built around himself. He'd been isolated for so long that he'd forgotten how to be part of something larger than himself. But the alliance, the partnership with Eliza, the growing sense of community, it had reminded him that strength didn't have to mean solitude. On a clear morning in late summer of their 3rd year together, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She'd thought it impossible, The marriage had remained largely platonic, though that had shifted slowly over time into something warmer, more intimate. But impossible or not, there was no denying the signs. She told Dane that evening over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He set down his fork slowly. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor. All the signs are there." "How do you feel about it?" Terrified, hopeful, confused. She laughed shakily. "How do you feel about it?" "Same. All of those." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But also glad. A child means future. Means we're building something that'll outlast us. We're not exactly young parents. I'm 33, you're pushing 40. Old enough to know what we're doing, or at least old enough to fake it convincingly." He squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out, same as we figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed normally, and in early spring, almost exactly 4 years after Eliza had first arrived at the ranch, she delivered a healthy daughter. They named her Catherine, after Dane's mother, and she entered the world squalling with the same stubbornness her parents possessed. Holding that tiny, perfect being, Eliza felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This child would never know desperation the way she had, would never flee in terror, never feel powerless, never doubt her worth or right to exist safely in the world. Because Eliza and Dane had built something strong enough to protect her, a foundation solid enough to support her dreams. The years continued to pass in the way of frontier life. Slowly in the living, quickly in the looking back. Catherine grew, followed eventually by a son they named Henry. The ranch expanded, the alliance strengthened, the territory matured from wild frontier to something resembling civilization. Eliza's past receded until it felt like it had happened to someone else. She was no longer the desperate widow who'd arrived with nothing. She was Eliza Keller, rancher, alliance leader, mother, partner to Dane in building something that mattered. Sometimes she'd stand on the porch at sunset, watching her children play in the yard while Dane worked nearby, and marvel at the distance she'd traveled. From that frozen night when she'd knocked on a stranger's door to this, a life full of purpose, community, love in its many forms. Morrison died peacefully in his sleep at 78, having lived to see the alliance he'd helped build become the model for cooperative ranching across 3 territories. Sarah remarried late in life and sold her ranch to the Lopez brothers, who'd built it into one of the most successful operations in the region. Garrett moved to the territorial capital and became a legislator, fighting for land rights and fair water management. The alliance continued, now including ranchers and farmers across hundreds of miles, a network of mutual support that had transformed how the frontier operated. Eliza served on the governing board for 15 years before finally stepping down to focus on the ranch and family. Victor Hale was never seen again. Rumors placed him in California, Mexico, even back east under an assumed name. His abandoned properties were divided and sold, breaking up the concentrated power that had made him so dangerous. His cautionary tale became legend, a warning about unchecked greed and the eventual triumph of community over individual tyranny. On a summer evening in her 50th year, Eliza sat on that same porch with Dane, now silver-haired and weathered, but still strong, still steady. Their children were grown, Catherine married to a rancher 2 territories over, Henry running the day-to-day operations of the expanded ranch. Grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "You ever regret it?" Dane asked. "Staying here instead of heading somewhere easier?" "Not once. You?" "Not once." He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Best decision I ever made, lying to those bounty hunters. Best decision I ever made, accepting your crazy proposal." It was crazy, wasn't it? Marry a stranger, build a life from nothing, take on the most powerful man in the territory. Completely insane. We should have failed spectacularly. But we didn't. No, we didn't. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The land they'd fought for, bled for, built on, stretched before them. Not perfect, never easy, but theirs in every way that mattered. Eliza thought about the terrified woman who'd arrived here with nothing but fear and desperation. Thought about how that woman had learned to stand, to fight, to build something extraordinary from the ruins of her past. The transformation hadn't been quick or clean or easy. It had been brutal, painful, full of moments where she'd wanted to quit, but she hadn't quit, had chosen each day to stay, to try, to become someone stronger than her circumstances. And in doing so, she discovered something profound, that power didn't come from avoiding hardship, but from facing it and surviving. That freedom wasn't the absence of constraints, but the ability to choose which constraints to accept and which to fight. That home wasn't a place you found, but something you built with your own hands, your own will, your own refusal to accept less than you deserved. The frontier had tried to break her, had thrown everything it could at her: cold, hunger, violence, corruption, her own past weaponized against her. She'd broken it instead, had taken the brutal, unforgiving wilderness and carved out a place where justice mattered more than power, where community triumphed over isolation, where even the most desperate fugitive could become a builder of something lasting. Catherine's oldest daughter ran up to the porch, demanding a story before bed. Eliza smiled and followed her inside, ready to tell the tale her granddaughter loved best, the story of how a woman with nothing had built everything, how courage and stubbornness and love in its many forms could transform not just one life, but an entire territory. It was a good story, a true story, in all the ways that mattered. And it was hers. Behind her, the sun set on the Wyoming frontier, painting the sky in colors that promised tomorrow would come, as it always did, full of possibility for those brave enough to reach for it. Eliza had reached, had fought, had won, and in winning, had become exactly who she'd needed to be all along. Not a victim, not a fugitive, not someone running from the past, but a woman building a future worth believing in. The last door on the frontier had opened to reveal not an ending, but a beginning. And what a beginning it had been.